I was blamed for infertility by my ex-husband and in-laws, despite normal results, so I left. Now my ex has lost everything due to his lies. I, 32F, was married to my ex-husband Jake, 34M, for 5 years. Initially, we had a good relationship. When we first met, Jake was charming, amusing, and easy to chat to. I genuinely believed I had met someone who would always have my back. But everything changed once we married. Jake's parents, particularly his mother, began pressuring us to have children almost immediately following the wedding. At first, the comments were lighthearted, such as, "When will we have a grandchild?" However, it quickly became the only topic they wanted to discuss. For reference, Jake is an only child whose parents were extremely controlling. His mother was the type of person who had a plan for everything: how Jake should live, who he should marry, and what his life should be like. While we were dating, I had no idea how much power his family wielded. However, following the wedding, it became evident that Jake had a strong desire to gain their approval for all he did. He was especially eager for his mother's approval, which produced a lot of stress between us. Around 2 years into our marriage, Jake's parents' push to have children became overwhelming. We had tried, but nothing was happening, so I went to the doctor to make sure everything was fine on my end. All of my tests came back normal, which was a relief for me. Naturally, I suggested Jake get tested as well, just to rule out any problems on his end. That's when things started to unravel. Jake refused to be tested. He acted as if I had insulted him by even mentioning it. He asserted that he wasn't the problem and refused to talk about it anymore. I was frustrated by his reaction since all I wanted to do was figure out what was going on so we could move forward. However, Jake was locked in a haughty mindset, as if admitting a potential problem on his side was impossible or shameful. As Jake continued to decline testing, I began to feel bad about myself. Even though the physicians had told me that nothing was wrong with me, his actions made me feel as if I was somehow to blame. Meanwhile, Jake's parents persisted with their intrusive questions and comments. Every time we visited them, the subject of their prospective grandchildren dominated the conversation. It got to the point where I dreaded going to family gatherings because I knew they'd just talk about having grandchildren. No matter how many times I attempted to explain that these things take time or that we were working on them, his mother gave me a condescending look, as if she was disappointed in me. Then they began making direct statements to me about how they hoped I was not the problem. At one family gathering, where a slew of Jake's distant relatives were present, Jake's mother bluntly informed me that she hoped I wasn't damaged, in a very loud voice, with a phony, worried expression on her face. I felt humiliated. Jake said nothing. He just sat there awkwardly, laughing it off as if it was no big thing. That stung more than anything. I believed he should have defended me, but instead he allowed his parents to humiliate me. When I tried to talk to him about it, he dismissed it, saying it was simply his mother's sense of humor. A few months later, we had another family meal, and Jake's mother chose to make another harsh remark. This time, she did not hold back. She went into hysterics, wailing about how old she was getting and how I was wrecking her dreams of having grandchildren. She then started screaming in my face, calling me a broken woman, and a disgrace to womanhood. Everyone stayed silent. I was horrified. I did everything I could to keep myself from saying something rude. I knew she enjoyed humiliating me in front of her family, but this was beyond uncalled for. I looked around to see if anyone had anything to say, but everyone just kept looking down at their plates. The only answer was Jake's father nodding in agreement with his wife. Jake, like the rest of his family, simply gazed at his plate, pretending nothing was going on. That was it. That was my breaking point. I couldn't believe that, despite everything I'd gone through while trying to figure out why we couldn't conceive, Jake refused to defend me. Seeing him sit there passively, without even looking at me, let me realize where our marriage stood. That night, when we arrived home, I packed my bags and informed Jake that I was going. He hardly reacts. He didn't seem to care that I was done. He was so accustomed to his parents being the focus that he had no idea he had lost me. That only made me angry. How difficult is it to stand up for someone you claim to love? I left that day and have never looked back. Leaving was not an easy decision, but it was the best one I've ever made. After I left, I moved in with a buddy for a few months while I planned my future moves. I filed for divorce, and the process went fairly smoothly. Jake did not fight it, and we ended things peacefully. After the divorce was finalized, I focused on reconstructing my life. I returned to my profession, surrounded myself with helpful friends, and finally met someone new, my now husband, Sam, 35 million. Sam has been an absolute breath of fresh air. In many ways, he is diametrically opposed to Jake. He listens, communicates, and, most importantly, always looks out for me. We ended up dating for only a year because I became pregnant and we rushed to marry. Let me tell you, I've had a much better time with Sam in this short period than I did with Jake. Sam and I were ecstatic about my pregnancy. It meant so much more to me after everything I'd been through with Jake and his family. Now, let's look at what transpired recently. One day, while out shopping with Sam, I ran across Jake's parents in the mall. To recap, it's been 2 years since I last saw them. I was visibly pregnant at the time, and their reaction was priceless. They were stunned to say the least. They tried to be courteous by making small chat, but I could see they were shocked to see me pregnant. I'll admit that seeing their reactions made me feel vindicated. They spent years torturing and discouraging me for being unable to conceive, yet look where I am now. I hastily said goodbye and nearly forgot I had met them. Sam and I were very busy preparing for the baby, and I had no desire to linger on the past. But then, approximately a week after the mall incident, Jake began texting and calling me. Initially, I ignored them. I assumed his parents had informed him of my pregnancy and new marriage, and Jake was just being nosy. But he did not stop. I eventually opened one of his texts. He was infuriated. When his parents discovered I was pregnant, they challenged him about our marriage and why we had never had children. Jake apparently never corrected his parents when they assumed I was the reason we couldn't have children. In fact, he encouraged people to believe I was the problem. When they saw I was pregnant, they understood he had been lying to them all along. According to what I've heard, his parents were outraged when they discovered the truth. They accused him of squandering years of their lives by convincing them that they would never have grandkids because of me, when in truth, Jake was most likely the one with fertility troubles. To make matters worse for Jake, his parents had always intended to leave him a sizable inheritance. However, after finding his lies, they cut him off totally. Of course, Jake blamed me for everything. He said that if I had not flaunted my pregnancy in front of his parents, none of this would have occurred. He accused me of ruining his life because he had lost everything, even the inheritance he had hoped for. I couldn't believe he was blaming this on me. I simply moved on with my life, and it was not my fault that his lies came back to haunt him. I have not answered Jake's mails, and I do not intend to. I'm content with where I am today, and I have no desire to become engaged in his family turmoil. In my opinion, Jake dug his own hole. He would not be in this situation if he had not allowed his parents to treat me like garbage or lied to them about why we couldn't have children. I really wish Jake would stop making me feel terrible about something that is entirely his fault. Despite my intense feelings about this, I spoke with a friend yesterday and told her all that had transpired. She told me I was wrong to leave Jake like that and that I should have pushed him harder to complete the examinations. She also claimed I should not have spoken with Jake's parents and that it was petty of me to do so. I mean, I can see how I was being petty. I never wanted to hurt Jake. I must say, however, that Jake being punished for his falsehoods is a pleasant bonus. Anyway, my husband told me that anything my buddy claimed was false, but I can't help but wonder if there was some truth to what she said. So, am I an asshole, AITA, for leaving my ex-husband after his family labeled me broken? And am I wrong not to feel sorry about him losing his inheritance? Update 1. Escalation and desperation. Okay, so things have grown much more complicated, and I really need to vent. After I posted my original story, I assumed that was the end of it. But oh boy, was I mistaken. Jake has been blowing up my phone non-stop. I blocked his number, but he then began texting me on social media. I also blocked him there, but he kept creating new accounts just to reach out. He even began phoning from several numbers. I did not respond to any of it, but the texts grew increasingly frantic and angry over time. At first, he was simply blaming me for damaging his connection with his parents. But now he's gone over the deep end, claiming I owe him since I took away his future. He insists that if I had stayed with him, none of this would have occurred. It's really exhausting. Some individuals in the comments on my initial post agreed with my buddy and questioned why I didn't push harder to persuade Jake to take fertility tests. So let me be clear. I tried. I truly tried. But every time I offered it, Jake would shut me down entirely. He acted as if I had betrayed him simply by bringing it up. He refused to speak to me for days after I inquired about the tests. I tried everything I could to be patient, but there's only so much you can do when someone is so stubborn. I eventually realized I couldn't force him to do something he didn't want to do, so I had to let it go for my own sanity. Some individuals have also accused me of being selfish for displaying my pregnancy in front of Jake's parents. Look, I hadn't planned to run into them. I was just out shopping with my spouse, minding my own business. I wasn't seeking for them specifically to rub my pregnancy in their faces. However, I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel great to see their astonished reactions. I experienced what I can only describe as a nightmare, with them continually belittling me, making me feel broken, and blaming me for everything. So, yeah, it felt nice to demonstrate that I wasn't the problem or broken, but I wasn't trying to upset Jake or make any drama. All I wanted was to enjoy my life. I viewed our interaction as a fun boost to my self-esteem. Jake has pushed things to a whole new level. He didn't simply message me. He found out where I live. I have no idea how he found my address, and I am afraid. He arrived at my residence 2 nights ago. He hammered on the door for at least 15 minutes, wanting to speak with me. Fortunately, my husband Sam was home and promptly instructed him to leave. Jake refused, claiming that he only wanted to explain himself, but Sam quickly shut that down. He warned Jake that if he didn't leave, we would contact the cops. Jake eventually backed down, but not before shrieking that I had wrecked everything for him. It was quite terrifying. I can't help but fear that if I let things continue unchecked, he'll do something even more insane. Many people asked me how I discovered Jake had lost his fortune. Fortunately, I didn't learn all of the specifics straight from him. From what I've gathered from his angry messages, it appears that his parents feel completely betrayed. They were enraged when they found that the reason they never had grandchildren wasn't because of me, but rather Jake himself. They believe he lied to them for years, convincing them that I was the problem. Because their whole attention was on having grandkids, they thought Jake no longer deserved the inheritance they had intended to leave him. According to my understanding, they have now completely cut him off, both emotionally and financially. Jake is heartbroken by this, which I suppose is why he's pursuing me so aggressively. I do not feel bad about him losing the inheritance. I mean, what was I meant to do? Stay in a terrible marriage so his parents don't find out the truth? That is not on me. Jake made his own decisions. He could have told his parents the truth at any time, but instead he allowed them to mistreat me and never defended me. So, no, I don't feel sorry for what happened to him. If anything, it seems like karma is finally coming up with him. However, I have to admit that I am a little nervous. Jake's behavior is becoming increasingly unpredictable. My spouse and I are already discussing taking extra precautions in case Jake turns up again. We've considered placing cameras around the house and even obtaining a restraining order if he doesn't back down. I want to believe that he will ultimately give up, but something tells me that he will not let this go easy. He seems to be spiraling out of control, and I have no idea what he's going to do next. So, that's where things are right now. I believe this chapter in my life was over, but Jake had other intentions. I simply hope he quickly sees that I am not to blame for his difficulties. All I did was move on with my life, and to be honest, I am happier than I have ever been. I simply want to be left alone so I can enjoy the life I've created with my husband and our upcoming baby. I'll keep you posted if anything more happens, but for now, I'm hoping Jake gets the word and leaves me alone. If not, I suppose we'll have to escalate the situation and engage authorities. Hopefully, that does not happen, but who knows at this point. Thank you to everyone who responded to my first post and offered suggestions. It made me realize that I wasn't crazy for leaving Jake or feeling the way I do now. I'll report again if anything changes, but for now, I'm just trying to keep focused on the future and avoid letting Jake's bullshit drag me back into the past. Update 2. Hello, everyone. I didn't expect to be back with another update so soon, but things have taken a wild turn. After my last update, I assumed Jake would finally leave me alone. I mean, even showing up at my place was already a step too far, right? To Jake, that was insignificant. Instead, he's devised a new strategy, which is just as crazy as it sounds. After Sam, my husband and I made it obvious that we did not want Jake anywhere near us, he began bombarding me with messages again. Instead of being upset and blaming me for everything, Jake's demeanor improved dramatically. Suddenly, he begged me for assistance. He began emailing me things like, "I need you to talk to my parents, and you owe me this." He transitioned from being like a complete lunatic to requesting favors. At this point, I was perplexed but also intrigued by what he planned to accomplish. Jake is now certain that if I speak with his parents and explain everything, they will give him his fortune back. He wants me to go to them, tell them it was a misunderstanding, and somehow persuade them that he is still deserving of the riches they were planning to leave him. At first, I assumed it was a joke. There's no way he believes I'd do that, right? But he's completely serious. He acts as if I can simply wave a magic wand and make everything better for him. He even said that if I hadn't bumped into them, they would never have found out, and he'd be set for life. I couldn't believe the crap coming out of his mouth. I couldn't believe he didn't realize he had caused all of this by lying to them and treating me like garbage for years. His lack of self-awareness was both strange and frightening. It takes a lot of ego to entirely disavow responsibility for your own acts, right? Anyway, I did not react to any of his erratic texts, and he became increasingly desperate. In a matter of days, his communications progressed from begging to threatening. He said things such as, "If you don't help me, I'll make sure everyone knows you're a liar, and you'll regret this." This is ridiculous. He's clearly on a downward spiral, and he's now attempting to intimidate me into doing anything he wants. Unfortunately for him, I'm no longer terrified of him. I've dealt with enough of his bullshit to know he's just talking, so I'm not getting embroiled in his family drama again. I tried to dodge him by banning all of his new phone numbers and accounts, but I have a nagging sense he will not stop. He's already come to my place once, so what's keeping him from trying again? My husband and I have discussed getting a restraining order, but we are still deciding on the best course of action. I don't want things to become worse, but I also can't continue living like this. I can't keep worrying if Jake would show up out of nowhere with new demands or threats. If he shows up again and I refuse to do what he asks, will he harm me? He's clearly spinning and not in the best of moods, so I can't say for certain that he wouldn't. To make matters worse, I discovered that Jake's parents had been communicating with some mutual friends. Apparently, they now blame me for their family's disintegration. They believe I influenced Jake into concealing the truth, and that I am the reason they are cutting him off. I'm not sure where to start with that. Everyone in Jake's life seemed to be in utter denial about who he truly is, and I find myself caught in the center of their distorted reality. Anyway, I've been doing my best to ignore Jake's attempts to contact me, but I'm not sure how much longer I can avoid the problem. I just want to concentrate on my pregnancy and my life with Sam, but Jake is making it impossible to do so. He's not just trying to get back into his parents' good graces. He's also attempting to drag me down with him, and I won't allow that to happen. I haven't decided what to do yet, but I'm thinking about contacting his parents myself, not to aid Jake, but to set the record right once and for all. If they choose to blame me for their son's falsehoods, that is their choice, but I will not sit back and let them spread rumors about me. At the same time, I'm concerned that any interaction with them will only make matters worse. It seems like a lose-lose situation. So that's where things stand right now. Jake has gone from angry and blaming me to begging and threatening, and I'm not sure what his next move will be. I just hope he realizes I'm not going to aid him and backs off before things spiral out of control. I'll keep you all posted if anything else happens, but for now, I'm just figuring out my next steps. Thank you for your continued support. I never anticipated this problem to escalate so quickly, but it helps to know that I'm not alone in coping with it. I'll update again if Jake does anything else, which, let's be honest, he most likely will. Update 3. Hello, everyone. I have some bad and good news. The terrible news is, this will be my final update. I know many of you have been quite invested in my story, and I am grateful that so many of you have been checking in on me on a daily basis to see that my baby and I are safe. As for the good news, I'm finally free of Jake. After Jake's latest round of begging and threatening, I was beginning to worry. Sam, my husband, and I had been talking about moving for a long time, and with everything going on, we decided it was the right moment to go out of town and start over somewhere far away. We located a new apartment in a completely different state, packed up our belongings, and departed without telling anyone where we were going. I was just finished with the drama. Besides, I'm pregnant and needed to focus on myself and the kid. But immediately before we departed, something happened that I can't believe. Remember when Jake's parents blamed me for everything? It appears that they chose to approach Jake personally. I learned about this from one of Jake's cousins, who later became a close friend. Clearly, the confrontation was explosive. Jake originally attempted to blame me for everything and persuade his parents to continue their hatred for me in order to reclaim his money. But Jake's parents were adamant about finding out why he wanted the inheritance so severely. They believed they had helped prepare him for life. They found him a terrific job, bought him a house, paid off his mortgage, and advised him on how to invest in good assets to provide him with financial security. They eventually learned the truth from Jake. Jake had been lying to them about his finances for years. He informed them that he was saving money, working hard, and preparing to take over the family business. In truth, he was spending all of their money on frivolous activities such as online gambling and holidays with his cronies. He never told them about it and maintained the pretense of being a responsible son, to preserve his place in their estate. When his parents learned this, they were furious. They not only cut Jake off financially, but also officially disowned him. They told him they no longer wanted anything to do with him. The inheritance he was so determined to retrieve was gone. Jake's parents apparently spoke with their family first, who suggested that withholding him an inheritance was unnecessary. The family advocated confronting Jake to hear his version of the story and maybe reinstating him in the will if he admitted his mistakes. However, as Jake's parents learnt the whole truth, any chance of reconciliation was lost. I'm not sure what Jake is going to do now, but I'm pleased it's no longer my responsibility. From what I've heard, he's trying to figure out his next move. I wish him the best of success with it. After hearing all of this, I felt a lot of comfort. For years, I thought I was the one who had failed, that I hadn't done enough to make things right with Jake and his family. But now it's evident that Jake was hiding a lot more from everyone, including me. His parents finally recognized him for who he truly is, and it feels like karma has come full circle. As for Sam and me, we've adjusted into our new house in another state and are doing well. I feel much safer now that we are away from Jake and his turmoil. We added security cameras just in case, but there has been no trace of Jake or any other strange communications. We even obtained a restraining order before leaving to guarantee that he could not follow us or try anything else. It feels great to know that he can't come after us anymore. Oh, and here's the icing on top. Jake's parents actually contacted me. I received a note from them, through the same cousin who alerted me about the confrontation, apologizing for how they had treated me over the years. They said they had no idea Jake was lying to them and were sorry for everything they had put me through. I'm not sure whether I'll ever respond to them, but it was wonderful to receive some sort of apology after everything. It's incredible how much things have changed. Anyway, I'm relieved to be able to focus on my life without the weight of all this turmoil. Sam and I are very excited about our baby, and I'm pleased we're in a quiet place now to embrace this new chapter. The last few months have been extremely difficult, but I believe we've come out stronger. Thank you again to everyone who has supported me throughout this struggle. Your comments and advice gave me the strength to keep going, and I thank you more than you know. That's all for now. Now to the next story, Story 2. After warning my brother-in-law about his wife's infidelity, my husband left me. 3 years later, his life collapsed due to gambling. 10 years ago, I, a 37-year-old woman, married my now ex-husband Liam, a 42-year-old man. I did have some problems with his family, but overall, our marriage was good. We got along well though, because it was nothing that I couldn't ignore or endure. The members of Liam's family were quite close to one another. My former brother-in-law Jonathan, now 48, was married to his older sister, Emily, now 46. Emily was a stay-at-home mother to her 2 children with Jonathan. Liam just showered the children with affection because they were his favorite. I really loved them, and they were excellent kids. Everything was cool between Liam and myself since I was the fun aunt. Liam and I experienced some financial difficulties about 5 years ago. I had taken time off work to attend to my mental well-being. My last job was incredibly toxic, with demands that never stopped and no boundaries. My supervisors and managers were as unsupportive as they could be, and I was supposed to be at their beck and call constantly. I made the decision to take a break from work at that point since I was in a terrible mental state. When I talked to Liam about my choice, he was encouraging and urged me to pursue it. For personal costs, we always kept our money apart. For shopping, household bills, date nights, and anything else we did together, we had a joint account. We made contributions to this account in line with our incomes. Even though we each donated the same percentage of our income, Liam's contribution was greater in absolute terms because he made more money. Before choosing to take a break, I had thoroughly examined my financial situation. I felt confident that I could comfortably cover my part until I was prepared to go back to work. Liam even offered to pay my portion during this time, but I turned him down right away. I had enough savings to handle, and I didn't want to mess with our arrangement. We shouldn't have had the financial difficulties we did because Liam had a lucrative position at a large corporation. But 3 months into my hiatus, Liam began acting oddly. Even when I spent my own money to buy something new or suggest ordering takeout, he would get upset with me. Only for shared expenses and never for my own purposes did I use some of the money from the joint account. He would either start acting rudely or create flimsy reasons if I suggested going out to eat on a given day since I didn't feel like cooking. I tried bringing it up a few times before giving up. But he would behave oddly even when I spent my own resources, which were funds beyond his control. This was very out of character for him. Throughout our whole marriage, Liam had never made an effort to dictate or offer commentary on my financial decisions. I drew him aside and inquired about his condition. After initially attempting to dismiss it, he finally admitted that he had spent practically all of our savings on gambling. Almost nothing remained for us. He had always handled our money, and I had also put my trust in him. I had total faith in him, therefore I never looked at my account. At first, I assumed he was kidding because this had never happened before. But what really startled me was the intensity in his eyes. I wanted to get away from him right away. I was meant to take this time off from work to take care of my mental health because he had gambled away my entire life savings. Rather, I was now confronted with the daunting task of organizing our financial matters. Our financial condition was much worse than he had acknowledged when I looked it over. Our house was about to be repossessed, and we were literally bankrupt. I got him into treatment and began applying for jobs in a frenzy. Fortunately, I was offered a position within 3 days, with great benefits. I was confident that I could gradually restore our riches and finances. There was so much to accomplish that I didn't even have time to comprehend my anger, even though I was outraged with him for breaching my confidence. I kept asking Liam to ask Jonathan for assistance during this time. Despite Jonathan's money, Liam consistently turned him down. I knew I couldn't continue to sink while he allowed his ego to get in the way, even though I didn't understand his hesitancy. After a while, I gave Jonathan a call, described the circumstances, and he assisted us right away. Liam began a quarrel rather than express gratitude. He said that in front of his brother-in-law, I had emasculated him. His ego and the facade he had built were more important to him than anything else, even at this crucial juncture in our lives, when we were essentially beginning over. That was the turning point for me. I was enraged. Not only had he ruined his own efforts, but he had ruined mine as well. He ruined everything we had planned for our family's future. I informed him that his lack of responsibility for our family and future demonstrated emasculation. We had intended to try for a child, so this was particularly upsetting. I made it very plain that until he changed his ways, I would not have a child with him. Instead of being appreciative that I had helped us escape the disaster he had made, with Jonathan's assistance, he reacted by accusing me of being a domineering wife. We put a lot of effort into rebuilding our finances over the course of the following year and a half, paying Jonathan back in full. Jonathan helped us get out of a predicament that had nothing to do with him, and for that I will always be thankful. But Liam was still upset that I had asked Jonathan for assistance. He didn't want the family to be aware of our financial predicament. Fortunately, Jonathan never told anyone, not even Emily, about it. Although Liam and I were still at odds, I wanted our relationship to finally improve. But I lost all regard for him as a person once whatever happened. After getting back on our feet, things started to improve. However, I observed tension between Jonathan and Emily at family get-togethers. I couldn't help but worry about Jonathan in particular. I told Liam that I was worried and asked him if he had also realized anything was off or if I was the only one. He dismissed it, claiming that nothing was wrong and that I was just overanalyzing it. But I went to Emily's apartment 2 days later to bring some tarts for the kids, and they were a huge hit. But Emily was acting really weirdly. She was clearly pressed for time and wanted me out of there as soon as possible. I left the home to see what she was up to, but I opted to wait in my car because I felt something wasn't right. Call me spooky or what, but I had a gut feeling that something was going on and I needed to step in. Suddenly I noticed a man exiting the house, and Emily was escorting him back. I wouldn't have had any suspicions at first, but her guilty behavior increased suspicions. The man slouched and wore a cap as though he didn't want to be identified. I quickly realized she was cheating on Jonathan after observing their body language. Her rudeness and lack of thanks horrified and sickened me. A part of me wanted to approach her right away, but I wasn't sure whether it was the appropriate thing to do and was too afraid of her response. Rather, I made the decision to head right home and inform Liam of what I had witnessed. I thought Liam would be shocked, angry, disgusted, or perhaps even incredulous. His real response was something I never would have predicted. After a few seconds of silence, Liam inquired as to whether I had discussed it with anyone else. He let out a breath of relief when I responded no, and advised me to keep what I had witnessed to myself. It would be an understatement to say I was taken aback. If he believed that I would remain silent and allow Jonathan to suffer in a marriage with an unfaithful woman, I told him he was crazy. Liam proposed that they might have an open marriage and contended that we weren't certain if she was unfaithful. We both knew Jonathan well enough to know that he would never consent to such a deal, I retorted. Nevertheless, Liam maintained that interfering was none of our business. I informed him that we wanted to be sure Emily wasn't betraying Jonathan, even if he had consented to something out of the ordinary. I insisted that before we confronted Emily, we speak with Jonathan. I was aware that Emily would immediately fabricate a falsehood to protect herself if she was involved in any questionable activities. Liam objected and made a number of reasons why we shouldn't tell Jonathan. I shouldn't get involved in other people's personal issues, he remarked. He went on to say that neither of us was aware of all the specifics of their relationship. I must admit that there were times when I nearly gave in. I started to doubt myself after Liam's deceptive arguments, and I even thought about speaking with Emily first. My logical mind, however, realized that something was off and that I had to intervene to support the man who had saved my family. Liam was playing on my emotional side, which kept dragging me in the other direction and pressuring me to believe his ridiculous defenses and explanations for Emily's actions. I fought this internal conflict for a long time. I finally came to the conclusion that I could no longer handle it. Even if it meant paying a price, I had to act morally. I told Liam about my choice before telling Jonathan. It would be an understatement to say that he went completely insane. That day, we got into the biggest fight of our lives. Simply put, he refused to listen to me. Compared to the fights we had during his whole gambling period, this one was considerably worse. He insisted that I had no right to meddle in and destroy his sister's life. I told him that I was concerned about his attitude about infidelity and his strong protection of his sister, and I wondered how he would respond if I cheated. In response, he said he didn't want anybody else to inform him of his wife's adultery. However, I didn't believe it. I couldn't get the suspicion that he was trying to justify his own actions by defending Emily's adultery. It made me question whether Liam was being unfaithful to me. The suspicion persisted even though I had no evidence or explanation beyond his response. I drove to Jonathan's house because I was determined to do the right thing. Unfortunately, Emily wasn't there when I tried to address her with Jonathan present. I described all I saw to Jonathan. In front of me, he sobbed and admitted that he had suspected Emily of being unfaithful but lacked evidence. He didn't want to make a snap judgment and accuse her. I acknowledged that I lacked solid proof as well. She was merely agitated when I saw her, and a male left the house immediately after. Although my intuition told me otherwise, I informed Jonathan that it might have been a coworker, a friend, or anybody else. Our talk ended when he thanked me for telling him. There was no news for several weeks. I was engaged in a kind of cold battle with Liam. I don't believe he told Jonathan or Emily that I had found out about her affair. Then one day Jonathan revealed that he and Emily were divorcing. My ex-father-in-law and ex-mother-in-law were taken aback by this news because none had predicted it. With their intense love and lovely lifestyle, Emily and Jonathan had always seemed like the ideal pair. Everyone was shocked, with the exception of myself. Jonathan continued to act like a gentleman, but Emily appeared glum and as like she had been crying for days. He just said that there was nothing left to save in their relationship, but he never gave an explanation for his decision to break up with her. Emily arrived at my house a few days later, yelling uncontrollably. I realized then that I was the one who had told Jonathan, as Liam had claimed to have told her. I can't even recall the disgusting things she said to me, including her curses. I remained composed and informed her that she was the cause of this. Nothing would change if you blamed me. She was the only one who had to deal with the fallout from her decision to cheat. I had entirely ceased talking to Liam by now. It became mentally taxing to live in the same house as him every day. Liam and Emily gradually started to turn other family members against me. Liam informed his mother that I had given Jonathan false information about poor Emily, which resulted in their split, and Emily prevented her children from seeing me. I became the antagonist overnight. Everyone was too preoccupied with agitating me to notice the true source of the issue. I eventually had enough one day and lost my temper. Since his gambling was discovered, Liam and I had been having problems, and I was certain that I wanted to get a divorce from him because of all this drama. I would never respect him again because of anything he did. Living with a gambler and someone who could justify cheating was not anything I could imagine. His actions gave the impression that he was guilty, and I must admit that I secretly feared he was also cheating on me. I had, however, psychologically checked out of the marriage by this time. I wouldn't have cared if he had an affair. It would have only strengthened my resolve to get a divorce. I brought the family together and explained the true cause of Emily and Jonathan's divorce. I told Liam that I had caught Emily with a stranger and that he had fiercely protected his sister. When I told Jonathan about the affair, Emily and Liam started openly disparaging me, and I explained that nothing I said had convinced him to see reason. I also informed the family that I was done putting up with their terrible treatment of me during this journey. I was shocked to learn that both my ex-father-in-law and ex-mother-in-law stood up for their kids. At that point, I realized beyond a reasonable doubt that this family was wholly toxic. For the sake of my mental health, I understood that walking away was the proper thing to do. There was absolute stillness in the room as I made the public announcement that I would also be filing for divorce. Liam was astonished, as though a bulb had been struck over his head. I was very gratified by his wide-eyed response. I also informed him that I was determined to go with the divorce and that he had to leave my home within 2 weeks because his family was so close. Liam's tone completely changed. He began to sincerely apologize and pleaded with me to make amends. He made an effort to change things up by planning date evenings and scheduling spa treatments as though my problem was that I wasn't paying enough attention. He didn't realize how serious the situation was. I had to sit him down and tell him that I didn't like him as a person anymore, Thus I was leaving him. There was nothing he could do about it, and my choice was final. It took Liam a while to come to terms with this, but he had to. After he moved out, our divorce was formalized, which coincided with the finalization of Jonathan and Emily's divorce. I sold my home in a matter of months and relocated to a different location in search of a better employment opportunity. For me, the move 3 years ago was a new beginning. I haven't communicated with any members of that family since. I talk to Jonathan sometimes, but not much else. I got a text message from an unknown number 2 days ago. Liam was the one. He called me and sobbed uncontrollably, telling me that letting me go was the worst thing he had ever done. He advised me to follow my gut at all times and to have battled harder to keep me. I asked him what was going on since I didn't want to hear his apologies. It seems that Liam was originally content after being married again, this time to Emily's friend. But Emily and his new wife had disappeared since last week. He initially called the police because he thought something horrible had happened to them. However, Liam was contacted again by the police, who informed him that Emily and his new wife were safe and specifically requested that he refrain from attempting to get in touch with them. In essence, his sister and new wife had fled with him, emptying his bank account. I hoped it was only a vacation and they would return, but if it was more than that, he was really screwed. Instead of consoling him, I had to fight the impulse to laugh in his face while he sobbed like a kid on the phone. He brought this upon himself and now has to lie in the grave he dug. Feel free to call me cruel, but that's the reality. I apologized to him for the situation, but I didn't understand why he was entangling me in his private drama. After he was silent for a bit, I realized I had made the desired remark. He paused, then added he wanted my assistance in attempting to find them. Since I had been the one to save him from his previous predicament, he also sought my advice on how to improve his financial situation. I informed him that I would not be assisting him this time and advised him to eat dirt. I made it plain that his issues were his own and that I had nothing further to do with him. I then hung up the phone. I hate to say it, but I was happy that he was at last taking responsibility for his acts. I had no desire to bring him back, and I was happy that I had divorced him. He forced me to put in a lot of effort to restore our fortune before revealing his true intentions in terms of cheating. I had been most hurt by that. I would have left the marriage the moment he admitted to gambling if I had known he would end up this way. But for nothing, I stayed, toiled, and made sacrifices. I was really irritated by that. Now that his behavior and habits are finally catching up with him, I couldn't help but notice how ironic it was that Emily would betray him of all people. First update? Due to the fact that this is fresh tea, I decided to spy on it. I learned that Emily and Liam's 21-year-old wife had planned a trip to Europe and was spending a lot of money. Their regular social media updates raise suspicions in my mind because the material is readily available to the public. They have shared content on Instagram and other social media sites, but I believe they have blocked every member of the family to keep others from learning about it. I'm currently considering telling Liam what I discovered. There is a part of me that feels that I ought to tell him and at least somewhat assist him. The other side of me is aware that if I assist him, he will become reliant on me and begin requesting more favors. Furthermore, if he employs his intellect rather than dwelling on his own misery, he will be able to locate them just as readily as I did. He told me he was at his lowest and needed my aid in another heartbreaking text. Though I haven't made up my mind yet, I'm thinking of giving in. Second update. Some new drama has emerged since my last update, which was quite some time ago. When I finally informed Liam what I had discovered, he congratulated me but, predictably, started requesting more favors almost away. I adamantly informed him that this was the point at which I would no longer take his cries or even his calls. Although he sounded insulted, he refrained from arguing. Since he hadn't phoned me back, I assumed that was the end of it. But my ex-mother-in-law called me in the middle of the night 2 nights ago. She seemed desperate as she said they were in legal hot water and wanted my assistance. I practice law. She clarified that Samantha, Liam's new wife, had actually eloped with him and that Liam was now facing threats from her parents to file an abduction case against him. I jumped out of bed like I was electrified. Liam and a 21-year-old had fled. Even though she was of legal age, the circumstances begged for emotional blackmail. I was appalled and outraged. It was unbelievable to me that I had ever been married to a man who was capable of such behavior. I informed my former mother-in-law that Samantha's parents' accusations would be deemed invalid if she had left of her own volition, and that they would have few legal options. My ex-mother-in-law broke down in tears at that point, stating that Samantha was now supporting her parents' allegations. Samantha was accusing Liam of having associated with her when she was a child and of grooming her. "I will not stand by him," she said. This realization completely blew my mind. After doing the arithmetic, I came to the conclusion that this was probably the reason Liam had been so adamantly defending Emily's infidelity, because he had also cheated and was grooming a child. I informed my former mother-in-law that they should all be put to death for manipulating the life and feelings of a little girl. They apologized for everything, and she pleaded with me to speak on Liam's behalf. I flatly refused, telling her that while I would be happy to challenge him in court, I would never stand up for him. Knowing full well that her dear son had cheated on me with a minor, used my money to rebuild his life, and was now facing the repercussions of his actions, I informed her that she had some audacity in asking for my help. After cursing at me, she ended the phone. My nights have been restless ever since that call. It still amazes me that I was once wed to a predator. No obvious indicators had been present, or maybe I had overlooked some minor ones. In any case, I'm sickened by the realization. Liam ought to spend the remainder of his life, possibly even longer, rotting in prison. I'm really sorry for the little girl. Even if they began dating when she was 17, Liam was 38 years old at the time, making him an adult with a child enrolled in school. The 21-year age difference was already alarming. Even worse, the fact that Emily had been friends with this girl raised the possibility that Emily had introduced them. If accurate, the whole family was involved in this poisoning. I'm glad I was able to leave this terrible household and preserve my future in time. Third update. Fortunately, no one in my ex's family has provided me with any direct updates. Liam and my ex-mother-in-law have both stopped talking. But Jonathan talked to me, and I picked up some knowledge from him. Emily and Samantha returned home in a matter of weeks, apparently. Samantha began altering her tale at that point. She declared her desire to divorce Liam and go back to her family, claiming he had groomed her. Involved, her parents threatened to file charges against Liam. Even though their case was based on dubious legal grounds, Jonathan clarified, it was sufficient to frighten the family. In order to keep Samantha and her parents silent and prevent any official accusations, Liam ultimately paid them a large sum of money. Liam's financial situation is now officially ruined. In all of this, Emily pretended to be innocent, saying Samantha had informed her that Liam had given her the money. They have no one else to turn to but one another, even though they all know it's absurd. According to recent information, my ex-mother-in-law and ex-father-in-law intend to downsize, so until they can work things out, the whole family will be living in a one-bedroom apartment. Liam has practically little money left in his bank account, and Emily works a minimum wage job. According to Jonathan, Emily contacted him pleading for crumbs, but he ignored her calls. She couldn't coerce him into giving her money in that manner because he has exclusive custody of their children. The family as a whole is extremely dysfunctional and codependent. I'm so glad I got away from their mayhem at that time. I'm glad I've moved on, even if I wish I had never interacted with them in any way. For what he did to the young girl, I can only hope Liam gets jail time. I have no doubt that if he can do something like this once, he will do it again since he is a criminal and a groomer. Sharing a one-bedroom apartment with his parents and sister is a form of prison in and of itself, even though I wish there were a method to throw him in jail. He's going to have a bad time. Fortunately, none of them have gotten in touch with me. I've blocked them on all devices and accounts, and I'm hoping that nothing further will happen to entangle me in their drama. I sorely need calm in my life since I'm tired of their mayhem. Now to the next story, Story 3. My golden child brother ruined my childhood, then framed and sued me after I married because he liked my wife. Hi Reddit, I need some guidance on a complex position I'm in, therefore I'm using a throwaway account. I just want this out there, so please pardon any errors. I'm a 43-year-old man who is the youngest of 2 siblings. To give you the whole picture, I'll attempt to give a chronological account. The golden kid in our family has always been my 45-year-old brother, Michael. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes as a child. For instance, they encouraged him and helped him get better when he received poor grades, but even though I received respectable grades, I was disappointed. For graduating from high school, I got $300 and a pat on the back, while he got a new automobile and a huge celebration. Although we usually did our own thing, Michael wasn't a bad brother. I felt the desire to go out and experience life on my own, but I didn't really protest. I completed my MBA in 7 years while attending a university in a different city. I got a job back in our hometown once I graduated. With the exception of holidays and birthdays, I didn't spend much time with my family throughout this time. My brother barely made it through high school because he wasn't the best student. After he left college, my parents assisted him in opening a modest hardware store. Despite my happiness for him, I kept my attention on myself. I began dating Emily, who was 20 at the time, around this period. We both came from the same city and met in college. After returning home, we cohabitated, got jobs, and concentrated on starting a family. I presented Emily to my family over the 2008 holidays. I felt more loved than I have in years since they were unexpectedly kind and open. But I didn't give it much attention when I saw how much Michael was staring at her during the event. He soon began coming to my flat more often, first once every 4 months and then nearly every day. Since he visited in the evenings when Emily and I were attempting to unwind after work, it became bothersome. Eventually, I had to establish limits, which resulted in a heated argument with my parents. Michael expressed regret and made his trips more manageable by limiting them to weekends once every 2 months. I proposed to Emily in 2011, and we told Emily's family that we were engaged. Michael simply shook my hand and left the little celebration I had planned, but my parents were delighted. After that, he vanished for a few weeks. When we were married in 2013, Michael brought a guest, Laura, to the wedding. 11 months later, in 2014, they were married. I was having a happy marriage. In 2015, Olivia, our first daughter, was born, and in 2017, Chloe, our second. Laura messaged me in 2016 to let me know that Michael's obsession with Emily was the main cause of their breakup. I told her I was sorry and wished her luck. In our conversation, I also questioned Emily about her relationships with Laura. She informed me that from the beginning, Laura had been a little aloof and cold with her. In front of my family, I made the decision to confront my brother. I questioned him about why his passion with my wife was ruining his life. The inquiry caught him off guard, and he denied everything. Following a heated fight, I told Michael that he was no longer welcome in my home. Emily and my dad spoke with me and reassured me that Michael was still family regardless of everything. I made the decision to be friendly for everyone's benefit. We continued living our lives as it appeared that Michael was sincerely trying to improve himself. It was July 25th, and I can still clearly recall the day in 2018. While my wife took our children to see their grandparents, I was running a number of errands. My father called me after lunch and asked me to come over to their place. He sounded irate, and I could feel the tension when I got there. There were some members of my extended family there as well as my parents, who were attempting to comfort my wife, who was crying. They accused me of assaulting a girl at a party weeks prior and sent her threatening texts instructing her not to report it, which caught me off guard when I inquired about what had transpired. I had known Amanda, the girl in question, back in high school. I occasionally hung out with a wider group of friends, including her. Amanda claimed that I had attacked her after following her to her car following a club party. Along with her allegation, she sent screenshots of an alleged chat with my wife as proof. I was startled and perplexed. My parents told me they never wanted to see me again after my father gave me a heavy slap across the face. Emily was enraged and said we were finished. No one paid attention to my attempts to defend myself and show that I had done nothing of the like. I was told that Emily and the children would not come back to me, and I was essentially thrown out of the house. In addition, my father promised to come to my flat and get their possessions. I appealed with them to change their minds when my father visited the residence. Ignoring me, he packed some bags and warned me not to get in touch with them ever again. In addition, he threatened to turn me over to the police himself if I did. By the evening, Michael had posted Amanda's narrative and the screenshots to our WhatsApp group for our extended family. I was unanimously expelled from the organization shortly after. Friends from my group called me over the course of the following few days to express their displeasure and advise me not to get in touch with them ever again. I was a complete disaster at this time. I was unable to work, eat or sleep. My supervisor brought me in for a talk after hearing the rumors. He told me to leave the company to preserve my record, even though he couldn't do anything about the rumors without the police becoming involved. He threatened to fire me without severance and with a damaged record if the police were involved. A few days later, I reluctantly accepted his recommendation and resigned. I was still living in agony in the middle of August when I got 2 court documents, Emily's divorce papers and a letter of disownment from my family. When I went to my parents' house in my drunken and desperate state, Michael confronted me. I was assailed by him, who called me a disgrace to the family and said that my disownment was a wonderful thing. I could hardly stand and had blood running down my face by the time he was finished. Emily and my dad looked on from a distance but took no action. I eventually sat there in tears, realizing that I had lost everyone and all I knew. I remained cooped up in my flat while the divorce was being processed. The divorce proceeded as amicably as possible given the situation. I didn't have to pay child support or alimony because I was unemployed and my ex-parents said they would take care of the kids. Officially, I was divorced by January 2019. It was really difficult for me to try to put my life back together. I pondered confronting Amanda during this period, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it may make things worse. Even without sufficient proof, a single phone call may land me in jail for 5 to 6 years due to rules in my nation that prioritize women. I had a serious injury in February 2019 and had to recuperate for roughly 5 weeks. Emily was still my emergency number when the medical staff called. No one came to see how I was doing, and she hung up. I had to get back on my feet, if only to keep a roof over my head, after realizing that I had wasted a large amount of my funds. I sold all of my furniture, settled my outstanding rent, and made the decision to start over in a new city after realizing I couldn't reconstruct my life in the same location. I started looking for a job after moving 2 hours away, but I was unsuccessful. I drank too much throughout this time, and I had constant thoughts of taking my own life. For months I grew accustomed to waking up from dreams in a cold sweat. I suddenly ran across David, a former college classmate, 4 months later. Back then, David was the quiet boy who rarely spoke to others. Seeing him after all these years was unexpected. He called my name after spotting me in a crowd. After exchanging greetings, we briefly discussed our lives. I informed him that I was seeking employment in the city. David stated that he had recently resigned from his position and intended to launch his own management consulting business. Later that day, he asked me out for a drink and, after we talked about our careers, he gave me a job offer. He claimed that he required some knowledgeable individuals. I nodded, believing that in order to keep my thoughts busy, I needed to immerse myself in my task. But before making a commitment, I told him I wanted to meet with his staff and talk more about it. David introduced me to another team member, Mark, 2 days later. He clarified that going forward, it will just be the 3 of us. I shook hands with Mark and explained that I had something to impart before we could continue. I revealed everything. My divorce, my disownment, the allegations, and how I had lost everything. I was crying as I described what had happened. David and Mark sympathized with me and told me there wouldn't be any problems as long as I didn't have any criminal history. I clarified that I had never been visited or charged by the police. David stated he would have a thorough background check done just to be sure. I agreed and fully grasped his point of view. I was living in a dilapidated rental at the time in order to save money. In case things didn't work out, I waited patiently for 2 weeks while still looking for work elsewhere. David called me 2 weeks later, and we got together that day. He welcomed me to the team and assured me that there were no accusations against me. Following that, I pushed myself into my work and, at Derek's suggestion, began going to therapy sessions. In addition, I joined a gym and used the punching bag to release a lot of my frustrations, increasing my weight from an average of 77 kilograms to over 105 kilograms. Since Derek was about Michael's age, we became gym pals, and I began to regard him as an older brother. I had regained a great deal of control over my life by the end of 2019. As the consultancy business flourished, revenue began to flow in. I started to recover, at least somewhat, after renting a lovely apartment in a respectable area. I understood that in order to truly move on, I had to take action. With his and his parents' approval, I went to court and formally changed my last name to Derek's. They welcomed me into many of their family events since they thought I was a wonderful guy. In an attempt to show my appreciation for their generosity and encouragement, I even acted as Derek's best man at his wedding. I made another attempt at dating, but it was unsuccessful because of my unresolved emotional issues, until I met Kim in 2020. Kim, 29, has half Italian and half Korean ancestry. At a coffee shop where I frequently got coffee and occasionally stopped to sit, I first noticed her. Derek once saw her staring at me and urged me to ask her out, even though at first we simply spoke for orders. She worked behind the counter. Later that day, after some hesitation, I asked her for drinks. She said she wanted to see me again after our wonderful evening. But I thought it would end like the dates I've had before, when I informed them about my background and they left. When someone left after hearing my story, I never held them responsible. I made the decision to share my background with Kim during our lunch date on our second date. Before I proceeded, I wanted her to be fully informed. I talked about the charges, the disavowal, and my difficulties letting go. Although she was caught off guard, she listened to me as I told her that I would never consider harming somebody in that way. Before choosing to keep dating me, I advised her to understand what she was getting into. Kim contacted a few days later and requested a meeting. She told me she trusted me and wanted to try our connection when we first met at the coffee shop where she worked. I couldn't think someone could welcome me in spite of everything, so I was doubtful and even started crying. We took our relationship seriously and found great pleasure in each other's presence. I felt like I was finally getting well for the first time. I even traveled to Europe with Kim for my first vacation in years, and it was incredible. We maintained continuous phone and FaceTime communication during the 2021 epidemic. Kim asked if she could live with me when things started to settle down in the second half of the year. I concurred because she was having trouble finding employment when her position at the coffee business terminated. I recommended that Kim look into launching a food business because she was an amazing chef. With her parents' help, Kim was able to establish a cloud kitchen by the middle of 2022 and start delivering food to the surrounding areas. Our lives were going well together. Even though I was still dealing with some mental problems, I no longer had suicide ideas. But sometimes the dreams persisted. Kim declared her pregnancy in February 2024. I experienced a wide range of feelings, including grief for the family I had lost, dread of beginning over, and immense delight. Emotionally, I was all over the place. After Kim reassured me, we eventually dozed off together. Kim was ecstatic when I proposed to her shortly after. My life seemed to be finally heading in the direction of stability and serenity. Preparations were underway as we decided on a mid-June wedding date. I genuinely thought that things were finally improving. I got a call at the end of May from an unidentified number. Someone was crying when I responded. "Hello, this is Amanda," she said. I recognized her voice right away and hung up in a fit of rage. My companion, Kim, saw my look and approached me with worry. I struggled to contain my anger and tears as I described who it was. Kim picked up the phone and put it on speaker when it called again. The man who answered the phone identified himself as Amanda's fiancé. Amanda wanted to be honest about what had happened in the past, he explained. With tears in her eyes, Amanda called and apologized repeatedly. I was too emotional to reply, so Kim spoke most of the time. "They will call back later," she told Amanda's fiancé. Kim called Derek to come over as soon as the call was over. Derek calmly listened to Kim's explanation of the circumstances. He hugged me and suggested that we set up a meeting at a lawyer's office so that Amanda's confession could be recorded in case it was ever needed. After I called my lawyer and told him everything, he set up a meeting at his office. 3 days after I informed Amanda over the phone, we met at the attorney's office. Amanda appeared completely defeated, and the only person beside her was her fiancé. My lawyer mediated the encounter, which was captured on camera. Kim supported me by sitting next to me. Amanda started going into great detail about what had transpired. The main point is this: my brother Michael and Amanda were having an affair in secret in 2016. The whole scheme to frame me was planned by Michael. He purchased a new phone, took my profile photo from WhatsApp, and used it to fabricate screenshots of my chats with Amanda. Amanda loved him and would do anything for him, so she agreed to the plan. I wavered between tears and fury as Amanda told me all about it. I genuinely believe that I may have faced assault charges if Kim hadn't been present. Even though my lawyer tried to be kind, Kim, who was angry and probably made worse by her pregnancy, gave Amanda a vicious verbal abuse. I fought back tears and rage as I questioned them why they were coming forward to tell me this. Kim also turned to Amanda's fiancé and warned him, "If you still marry this human garbage, then you deserve whatever happens." Mark, Amanda's fiancé, clarified that while they were intoxicated a few weeks prior, Amanda blurted out that she had assisted an ex in ruining a marriage. She eventually came clean after he pressed and questioned her about it repeatedly. If Amanda desired harmony in her life, Mark stressed that she had take responsibility for her faults. After assisting Michael, Amanda explained, he grew aloof and chilly toward her and ended their relationship 6 months later. She had spent a lot of time in therapy trying to deal with her guilt, but she was too afraid to come clean even though she felt awful. My lawyer intervened after everything was explained and recommended a 20-minute respite before proceeding. My lawyer went over my alternatives while Amanda and Mark went out. He clarified that I had sufficient proof to file defamation lawsuits against Michael and Amanda. Even though I was furious, I made the decision that this would not interfere with my impending wedding. In order to prevent causing trouble with my ex-family, I informed my lawyer that I would handle this after the wedding and told Amanda not to notify anybody else. Kim gave me a hug after the meeting and told me that she trusted her gut and that she felt relieved. I felt the same way she did. David and Derek were both my best men at our tiny wedding, and we then traveled throughout Europe for 3 weeks on our honeymoon. We both had an incredible time. During the honeymoon, I was able to enjoy myself, but the nightmares increased in frequency. Kim was there for me no matter what. I talked to my therapist about these emotions, and she said that in order to get closure, I would eventually have to face my former family. After giving it some thought, I made the decision to get in touch with Amanda once more in July. I offered her a means of avoiding financial catastrophe, but I also informed her that I intended to pursue legal action in light of her comments. I told her to go to Emily's office by herself and tell Emily what she had told us at the lawyer's office. During the talk, Amanda broke down in tears and disclosed that Mark had abandoned her. Although I hoped I could feel sorry for her, I informed her that I couldn't. I also mentioned that my brother was the target of karma, which had finally come up with her. It was a few days later that Emily texted me. I had always emailed her birthday greetings and wishes on our daughter's birthdays and holidays, even though I was blocked. I hadn't heard from her in 8 years until this communication. She wanted to speak with me. I told her I would give her a call in a few hours because I didn't want to have this chat by myself. With Kim by my side, I went home and made the call. I could hear Emily crying violently as soon as she picked up the phone. Once she had calmed down, she apologized and said how awful she felt. I was able to keep my cool and tell her how much it stung to know that she didn't think highly of me because she had fallen so readily into Michael's trap. I inquired about my girls with Emily. They were doing great, she remarked. She said it was 2 days ago when I inquired when she had met Amanda. She acknowledged that it took her a long time to realize how swiftly she had cut off contact with me and how mistaken she had been. She alerted my ex-parents to Amanda's revelation right away, and they were equally as shocked. They all wanted to get in touch with me, but Emily insisted on apologizing first. I informed her that her actions were really hurtful. "What about the golden child, Michael?" I asked her. "He was expelled from the residence," she disclosed. That made me laugh. Emily then revealed even another shocking detail. Michael had been her support system at that period, and she had married him a year after our divorce was official. Everything suddenly made sense. It appeared that Michael had never really moved on from her. She also revealed to me that she and him had a daughter. Following these disclosures, I outlined my conditions. In order for Emily to comprehend the type of guy Michael was, I first advised her to contact my extended family and tell them about all he had done. Second, I made it clear that, while I intended to co-parent my 2 kids, I had no plans to make amends with her beyond what was required for our daughters. Third, I told her that I wanted to face my ex-parents face-to-face and that I would text her the time and date of our meeting. Knowing that Kim's pregnancy may have caused her emotions to be all over the place, I gave her a hug after our talk. Kim wept for us both, but I controlled my own feelings. We dozed off while holding each other. My phone was off when I woke up the following morning. I discovered a deluge of notifications after charging it, including hundreds of messages and more than 150 missed calls. Additionally, I was added back to the family group chat, where everyone was expressing regret. Messages from former friends also arrived throughout the course of the following few days, apologizing for making snap judgments. All I could say in response to the family group was that I was an outsider now and would stay that way because I had been disowned nearly a decade earlier. I informed them that my terms and timing, not theirs, would determine whether or not I forgave them. I quickly exited and asked not to be added back to the group. A few relatives attempted to criticize me, expressing their disappointment with my response. After being so eager to assume the worst, I shut them down by telling them they had no right to criticize me. I instructed them not to get in touch with me until I first contacted them. After a few weeks, I gave Emily a call and asked her to come over for the weekend so I could have a good look at my girls. As resolute and fierce as ever, Kim demanded to meet her stepdaughters as well. She was resolute despite our arguments, which usually involved my attempts to persuade her to take care of herself due to the pregnancy. After a while, I gave in. At a public park, we first met. Despite her somewhat unkempt appearance, Emily had tried to look professional for the meeting. I got to see Olivia and Chloe for the first time in 8 years. They were so much bigger now. Since I had been restricted from all social media and communication channels, my phone was the only place I had any recollection of them. Emily came to me in tears and attempted to give me a hug, but I stopped her by raising both of my hands. Afterward, I presented her to Kim as my spouse. In the park, she collapsed into a weeping mess. We sat down close by as Kim stepped up to console her. I sobbed while giving both of my girls firm embraces. Since they had always known Michael as their father, my daughters were naturally conflicted when they learned about me for the first time. But seeing me triggered a flood of feelings. There was a great deal of talking and crying. By nightfall, Emily and I were exchanging life updates. She disclosed that because he had provided for her at that period, she had married Michael a year after our divorce was official. For the first few years, he had looked after her and the girls, but everything finally broke apart. Michael was forced to close his landscaping firm completely due to the epidemic, and it never turned a profit. Even though his parents were now using their funds to make ends meet, Michael resisted starting anything new. Additionally, Emily informed me that she was divorcing Michael because she could no longer bear to see him. It had nothing to do with me, but I told her she could do whatever she wanted. I outlined my goals for the future. In order to aid in our collective healing, I first requested that Olivia and Chloe join me for family therapy sessions. It was time to make amends for the loss of their biological father. Second, I wanted to spend weekends with Kim and be involved in their life, But I told them that this would have to wait until after the baby was born, because I needed to spend the time I had left with the new baby. Finally, Emily said my parents wanted to get in touch with me. They were not my parents, I told her, and I had the letter they sent with the divorce papers as proof that they had disowned me. Nevertheless, Kim and Emily both urged me to meet them, claiming it could provide me some closure. I reluctantly consented and informed Emily that I would choose the time and location of the meeting. In order to spend more time with my girls, I requested Emily to spend the night in the city and made reservations for her at a hotel. We spent Sunday together the following day, taking in the sights of the city and having a good time. Olivia and Chloe both hugged me tightly before I left, and I told them I would see them the next week. I informed Emily that I would come to the girls' family therapy sessions, saving her the trouble of driving them. We had a successful initial introductory session, and my therapist recommended a counselor in their city. The therapist told me that Olivia and Chloe would eventually have to find out what my ex-brother Michael had done. I told her it would happen eventually, but I still consented. The therapist also recommended that I share my tale here and look for other viewpoints on my circumstances. To be honest, I might not have progressed this far if Derek hadn't pushed me. What should I do next? That is the question I have for you. Even though I call my ex-parents, I still harbor feelings and emotions for them that I intend to address eventually. I don't know how to interpret that or whether it makes sense. How do I handle Michael? Should I file a defamation lawsuit against him even though I doubt I'll ever want to see his face again? I'm worried that anything I do to him could have a detrimental effect on my ex's daughter, as I know he has one. I will do my best to answer any inquiries you may have. Now, on to the next story, Story 4. My ex invited me to his wedding to show off his rich fiancé, but my unexpected +1 turned the tables spectacularly. I'm a 22-year-old woman who met Dylan, a 30-year-old man, while we were both working part-time at Starbucks. Dylan was paying off his student loans at the time, and I was still in college, saving money to move out of my parents' house permanently. Due to their excessive gambling, his parents had accrued large debts and were unable to provide for him. We first became close by talking about our families, but after a while we discovered that we actually enjoyed being together. 2 years later, I graduated and had saved up enough cash to live independently. Dylan, however, had not been able to leave his parents' home because he was still having trouble paying off his student loans. I invited him to live with me. But he was unable to pay even his portion of the rent because of his debts. I agreed to pay 80% of the rent, and he would pay the other 20%. He gladly agreed. We divide utility costs equally, excluding rent. Dylan and I worked at separate companies. I had a corporate career with a flexible schedule, while his job was hands-on and required him to be on site for extended periods of time. As long as I achieved my goals, my supervisor didn't object if I worked from home. Dylan was frequently unable to assist around the house due to his rigorous work schedule. I therefore cleaned, cooked, did the laundry, and did the dishes. Since I knew how hard his job was, I didn't mind doing the majority of the housekeeping. He was always the last to eat though, so I did ask him to carry out the trash. Sadly, Dylan would always forget, so I was left to carry out the garbage each morning. I had to leave for work one weekend. The house was in utter chaos when I got back. Empty food packets, chocolate wrappers, and unwashed dishes littered the kitchen counter. The trash hadn't been removed, and the wash had accumulated. I just wanted to relax after a hard day at work, but the clutter was intolerable. In the hopes that Dylan would notice and value my efforts, I cleaned all evening. He stated he missed me and gave me a warm welcome when he got home, but he didn't appear to notice the change in the house. Instead, he sat down to watch his game right away, which made me feel dissatisfied and undervalued. I started crying. For the first time, I realized how little he appreciated me, whether it was because of his lack of appreciation, his tiredness, or his insomnia. Is something wrong? Dylan questioned, looking back. I told him I was ready to go to bed and shook my head, acting as like nothing was wrong. I reminded him again to take out the garbage before I went upstairs. He replied with a nod. As anticipated, the rubbish was still present the following morning. I became irate when Dylan asked me for breakfast as he entered the kitchen. If he wanted to eat, I told him he could prepare his own food. I lost it when he accused me of being impolite. He was worthless around the house, so I screamed at him. He implored me not to be so theatrical and blinked as though he had done nothing wrong. After inhaling deeply, I questioned him about why he never took out the trash. I forgot, he responded nonchalantly. After that, I asked him what he really did around the house except coming home and drinking beer while watching TV. He started out by saying that he deserved some downtime because he was constantly exhausted after work. After agreeing and nodding, I questioned. How about me? I reminded him that I cleaned the house, cooked for the two of us, did the laundry, and even ironed his shirts for the week after I got home from work. I asked him to take out the trash, and that was all. Dylan said he never requested me to perform such things, so he dismissed me. He continued by saying that his job was really difficult and that I should be able to relate to him and support him as his girlfriend. He even attempted to defend his position by saying that his mother had always treated his father in the same way. I was enraged to hear this. I became aware that, even though we weren't even married, I was allowing him to take advantage of me in spite of all the work I was doing to keep the house in order. I gave him a direct look and informed him that I would no longer be helping him around the house. We were meant to be equals, and I wasn't his mother. I told him he had to prepare his own meals, clean up after himself, do his own laundry, iron his own clothing, and take out the trash. He began to object as his eyes grew wide, but I stopped him with a raised hand. I also told him that he had to pay half the rent or leave. Incredulous, Dylan questioned the source of this. I clarified that I was fed up with putting in so much effort for him and not feeling valued. I left the house since I was running late for work, but he seemed to want to dispute. I had never set such firm boundaries in my life before, and I didn't feel bad about it. I followed through on my promise to do no more than clean up after myself. Seeing him fumble about the home to find clean clothing or iron his shirts before work was strangely pleasant. He didn't take out the garbage or clean the utensils, thinking I would do it for him later, but I said no. I chose to eat from takeout boxes so I could conveniently dispose of my trash without having to step into the kitchen when the dishes began to build up and the smell grew intolerable. Dylan made multiple attempts to speak with me, urging me to be a good partner and look after him, but I remained steadfast and uncompromising. When it came time to pay the rent, I told the landlord that Dylan would cover the other half and gave her my 50% up front. When he got home, he was furious and yelled at me to keep paying the same 80%. Reminding him that he never showed gratitude when I did, I firmly declined. I had finished assisting him. Despite his best efforts to make excuses, he was eventually forced to give the landlord his portion of the rent. He never once expressed regret to me during this entire ordeal. He never took the time to own up to his errors or show remorse for not appreciating the housework I had done. It was really disappointing. In retrospect, I wish I had recognized him sooner for who he really was. Our arguments continued to get worse over the following few months, with Dylan accusing me of being to blame for everything and attempting to deceive me into returning to my previous behavior. For Dylan, my promotion at work seemed to be the final straw. Dylan must have heard about it from one of our mutual friends, who happened to be my coworker, because that night we had the most intense argument of our relationship. After getting home intoxicated, Dylan woke me up and said that he needed to speak with me. Since he was obviously inebriated from the celebration with my friends that evening, I suggested that we speak tomorrow. I was so sleepy and irritated that I sat up in bed and asked him what was so essential that he had to wake me up in the middle of the night, but he said it was vital. Dylan then admitted inebriatedly that he had met someone at work. I realized right away that he was referring to Bella. He had brought me along to one of his office parties, where I had seen her. Bella was 25 years old, obviously quite wealthy, and the daughter of an industrialist. Her father's insistence that she required work experience was the only reason she worked. Dylan continued by saying that he was falling for her because, in his opinion, she was a real woman, in contrast to me. I honestly didn't care, so I stared at him without feeling anything. We were really just roommates at this time, and I knew that our relationship had been deteriorating for months. He went on to discuss his feelings for Bella, but I interrupted him in the middle of his statement. I told Dylan that I was pleased for him and didn't care if he was dating someone else. I recommended that we end our relationship amicably and that he vacate our home right away. Dylan inquired whether I was envious of Bella, seeming shocked. Telling him that I was genuinely relieved he had met someone else so I wouldn't feel bad about ending our relationship, I shook my head and grinned. Anger made Dylan's face flush. He said that my promotion had made me more self-assured. I told him calmly that our connection had nothing to do with my advancement. I had just come to the conclusion that we were no longer compatible during the last few months. I clarified that I could understand his desire to see someone else because we had evolved into more of a roommate than a love partner. Dylan began yelling, which surprised me because I assumed he would be relieved. He claimed to despise modern women, who show off their careers, like me. He said Bella was a lot better woman because all she wanted was to marry and have kids. I remained composed and reminded him that every woman had different requirements in spite of his yelling. I loved my job, but Bella might not care as much about it because she comes from a wealthy household. I advised him to be with Bella if he desired someone similar to her. I reaffirmed that we should stop arguing and that he was free to leave our home whenever he wanted. With wide eyes, he inquired about my ability to pay the rent. I clarified that I could now pay the full rent on my own without the assistance of roommates because I had received a rise. He started yelling at me after hearing this, accusing me of trying to brag in front of him. He continued by saying that Bella was wealthier than I was and even owned a home that her father had purchased for her. He insisted that I become more complacent and change who I was. Then he scoffed, stating that men ultimately desired a housewife rather than a lady who could make more money than they could. I was sick of arguing with him in the middle of the night, so I finally begged him to stop talking. I informed him that he could sleep on the couch until the end of the month, after which he would have to move out. Even though I could still hear him complaining, I chose to ignore him and resumed my slumber. Thankfully, Dylan began packing and gradually removing his belongings during the course of the week. As I considered the possibility of eventually having the entire property to myself, I began to feel excited. When I returned home last night, I was startled to see Dylan and Bella seated on our couch. I gave him a questioning glance, and he told me that he wanted to show Bella his apartment because it was his last night there. Knowing that I would return, I found it incomprehensible that he would bring another lady into our home without my permission. I greeted Bella pleasantly because I didn't want to be impolite and I believed that this wasn't her fault. I was shocked to see how disdainfully she regarded me and didn't even acknowledge me. I went to freshen up, not wanting to take anything personally. Later, Bella came to fetch some water while I was in the kitchen making spaghetti for myself. I felt uncomfortable for a minute as she stood there observing me. She looked at me with the same disdain as before when I inquired if she wanted anything. I chose to ignore her and carried on preparing my lunch with the intention of eating it quietly in my room. I was about to head downstairs after eating when I heard Bella and Dylan conversing. After dating someone who looked like me, Bella was telling Dylan how fortunate he was to have upgraded himself. Dylan laughed and agreed with her, and I froze in disbelief. When Bella questioned him about why he had ever fallen in love with me, Dylan replied something that broke my heart. Because I was naive enough to lend him money during college and pay for our dates, he admitted that he had taken advantage of me. He disclosed that he had been able to save a significant amount of money because I had been paying over half the rent for the previous 2 years. I was shocked by what I had just heard. I had assumed that he might have taken advantage of my kindness to pay over half his rent, but I was unaware that he had been taking advantage of me from the start. Bella and Dylan persisted in discussing our connection and making fun of me in every manner they could. I was on the verge of crying out of embarrassment, but I didn't want them to see me that way. I went back upstairs quietly and sobbed into my pillow for the remainder of the night. When I woke up the following morning, Bella and Dylan had left. He had formally moved out after gathering his belongings. I finally realized I was free of him, and I wandered around the home in a stupor. The sense of relief I experienced upon realizing that he was finally no longer in my house or in my life is beyond words. I danced around the house and shed happy tears. After that, I started to clean the entire place to remove all traces of him. I really appreciated being independent throughout the course of the following few weeks. What Bella and Dylan had said about me no longer mattered to me. Everything was well until 2 months later, when a mutual buddy told me at work that Dylan and Bella were getting married. It all seemed too abrupt, and I was surprised. When our buddy showed me their engagement photos, they looked like a happy couple. I acknowledged that I would never have been content with Dylan anyhow, but I also felt a twinge of regret for how he had taken advantage of me throughout the years. I was thus thrilled that he had discovered someone who could bring him joy. When I returned home that evening and looked in my mailbox, I discovered an unexpected wedding invitation. When I recognized that it was from Dylan and Bella, my eyes widened in surprise. Until I opened the invitation and noticed something scrawled in the corner, I initially believed it might have been an error or that he had invited me out of courtesy. "I want you to attend my wedding so you can see the grand life I'm going to have with Bella," was written inside the card. Slowly, it dawned on me that he had asked me just to flaunt his newfound fortune, his marriage, and his wealthy spouse. I inhaled deeply as I tried to figure out why he would invite me in this way given that all I had done over the years was look after him. My pent-up rage and resentment from all the years started to explode. I had to be petty with him, I realized. With a +1, I replied, yes. I was determined to make Dylan regret ever inviting me, and I had a scheme in the works. After turning on my laptop, I started looking through Bella's social media accounts. I looked at every photo she had ever uploaded. Fortunately, I was able to locate what I was searching for. Bella and her ex-boyfriend Jake had broken up just 6 months prior. They had obviously been dating for a very long time because she had multiple postings with him and their photos went all the way back to high school. Jake accepted my friend request from my profile, and I messaged him after he said yes. I was shocked when he answered, and we struck up a conversation. I informed Dylan that I was his ex and that I intended to invite him as a guest at their wedding. I told Jake everything since he appeared interested and wanted to know why I was contacting him. Jake talked candidly about Bella's repeated infidelity throughout the course of the following few weeks. I was unaware that she had recently had an affair with Dylan. He went on to disclose Bella's constant attraction to older males. He wasn't overly shocked, therefore, when she confessed her love for Dylan while they were still dating. They broke up fairly badly, as you may guess, and even though she told Jake they should stay friends, he blocked her everywhere. He looked to still be in love with Bella based on the way he spoke about her. I also shared with Jake my own story of Dylan's abuse of me throughout the years. I opened up to him about everything that Dylan had done to me and how Bella and Dylan had teased me. When Jake learned how Dylan had spoken about me and treated me, he was horrified. Jake listened to everything and eventually consented to come with me. I became excited when I imagined how my ex and Bella would have looked when they spotted me at their wedding to Jake. As anticipated, Dylan's eyes widened as he saw me entering with my special guest on the wedding day. He must have known right away that Jake was Bella's ex. We pretended to locate our assigned seats, ignoring his expression. I just grinned when Dylan approached me and muttered angrily, "Why are you here with Bella's ex?" He had to reluctantly make his way back up the aisle while giving me a fierce look because he couldn't make a disturbance in front of everyone. Everyone got up from their chairs when the bride was ready to make her entrance. With her father by her side, Bella looked lovely in her white floor-length gown as she made her way down the aisle. Following a flawless ceremony, the festivities were transferred to the reception area. Since she was wearing a different dress when she arrived at the reception, Bella must have gone to change. Jake and I had not yet caught Bella's attention. She stopped dead in her steps when she noticed Jake sitting next to me. Maybe still perplexed, Bella glanced at me and then at him. "What are you doing with me?" she asked Jake. Grinning, I informed her that I had asked him to join us as a guest in order to support her marriage. She asked Jake whether we were dating now, looking furious. Bella's cheeks flushed with rage, but Jake said nothing since this was an absurd question to ask in the first place. She gave me a sour look and nodded seriously when Jake asked if he could talk to her quietly since he didn't want her to make a scene. After they left, I turned to see Dylan hawkishly observing our exchange. Dylan appeared worried, but he was powerless to do anything but sit there and act as though nothing was wrong. The celebration went on, and everyone appeared to be having a good time, but an hour had gone by and the bride was nowhere to be seen. A few patrons began to take note and murmur to one another. When Bella's father became worried, he asked one of the bridesmaids to go see how she was doing. The bridesmaid ran up with a message in her hands a minute later. In front of everyone, she declared that Bella and her ex-boyfriend had fled. Everyone was stunned as they stood there. The bridesmaid went on to read the note in which Bella acknowledged that she had made a grave mistake by marrying Dylan and that meeting Jake had rekindled all of her old emotions. Dylan stood there looking vulnerable and ashamed as the visitors were further taken aback by the revelation. I was really astonished too. Even though I had brought Jake along to annoy Dylan, I never would have thought that things would end out this way. Dylan appeared as though he was prepared to rip someone's head off. Bella's parents really apologized for what had transpired and asked everyone to leave. I saw Dylan, who had once been arrogant and pompous, stand there by himself, utterly shocked by Bella's choice. Even though I feel a little bad about the wedding, I'm also relieved that Dylan's attempt to make me look bad didn't work out so well. The day that was supposed to demonstrate his victory over me had turned into the scene of his demise. Am I the A for spoiling my ex's wedding by bringing a special guest as a guest? Ever since I shared my tale, I have been getting conflicting responses. Some of you believe I went a bit too far, but many of you concur that I made the correct decision. I should make it clear that I never intended to ruin my ex's wedding and that I never mentioned it to Jake. I don't know what private conversations Bella and Jake had that led Bella to abruptly call off the wedding. Since my ex had asked me in the first place to flaunt his marriage to a wealthy woman like Bella, I just wanted to be spiteful with him. Bella's decision to end her marriage was entirely independent of me. I've texted Jake to ask him what happened, and I'll provide an update as soon as he responds. Second update, Jake contacted me. In a lengthy text message that he gave me yesterday, he essentially expressed his gratitude for my taking him to the wedding. He informed me of his and Bella's honeymoon, which she was scheduled to have with Dylan. Her parents, who were quite concerned about her, had also been consulted. He told me that he will be seeing me shortly to personally explain everything. Dylan, meanwhile, had been contacting me constantly since the wedding. He blamed me for ending his marriage in a series of hostile text messages and phone calls. I never responded to him, and I had no desire to converse with him. I was aware that I had nothing to do with Bella and Jake's joint escape. Dylan chose to arrive at my house today as he knew I would be home during the weekend. I initially requested him to go and wouldn't open the door. He insisted that he wouldn't go until he spoke with me. He could say anything he wanted to me standing outside my house since I warned him he wasn't let inside by opening the door a bit. Dylan began screaming at me, accusing me of ruining his life. He had apparently given notice at work, believing that after marrying someone as wealthy as Bella, he would never have to return. I brought Jake to their wedding, and he questioned me angrily why. I decided to tell him that I had overheard all he said to Bella that evening because I was becoming mad at him for blaming me. When I told him that I knew he had been using me to pay for our dates and his rent for all the years we dated, his eyes widened in surprise. He obviously didn't respect me, even though I assured him that I did all those things because I loved him. I also reminded him that I never bothered to become involved in his relationship and that I didn't care that much when he cheated on me with Bella. I was pushed over the brink though, when he invited me to their wedding and wanted to show me the life he would lead with his wealthy spouse. I informed him that he had no right to visit my home and scold me for something that wasn't my fault. He should be upset with Bella because she was an adult and made the decision to leave him. Dylan began to scream back that I shouldn't punish him for the past and that it wasn't his fault that I was so innocent that I didn't realize how he had been taking advantage of me for so long. As he went on to rave about how Bella was meant to transform his life and how he could have had everything he ever desired, I laughed at what he was saying. He disclosed that I had ruined his opportunity to flirt and woo Bella, despite his best efforts. I didn't want to listen to his statements any longer because they were so vile at this point. I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave my property. I pulled out my phone and dialed in front of him after he told me I would never dare to do that. As he was departing, he told me not to overreact and instantly retreated a few steps. I vowed to myself that this would be the last time I saw him before I closed the door. I have now told my family about the incident and blocked him everywhere. In order to document his actions and lodge a formal complaint against him in the event that he returns, I intend to install a camera on my door and change the locks on my property. Update 3. I haven't provided an update in a month. I didn't have time to respond to everyone who has been messaging me to inquire about whether Jake and I had ever met because I've been so busy at work. I'm glad to say that we did at last. A week ago, Jake said he was ready to chat and invited me to lunch. Bella was seated behind him when I arrived at the location. I thought Bella was coming to pick a fight with me, so I instantly braced myself. To my amazement though, she greeted me with a warm grin and a kind word when she spotted me. Jake reassured me that she was merely there to apologize, even if I wasn't really sure why she was there. Bella nodded and really apologized for her previous words toward me. She continued by telling Dylan her story. She disclosed that she would constantly receive a lot of attention and kindness from Dylan at work. They spent a lot of time together due to their hectic work schedules, and Dylan would often gripe about me and our relationship. He would express his dissatisfaction and his wish that he had a woman as attractive as Bella. She acknowledged that every time he gave her a compliment, she felt gratified and began to feel sorry for him. She got overly passionate and even slept with Dylan during a difficult time when she and Jake were going through a difficult time. Dylan then persuaded her to end their relationship by claiming that Jake wasn't suitable for her. Dylan kept messaging her, telling her that she was ideal for him and that they could live together. She eventually ended her relationship with Jake because she felt bad about cheating on him, and she believed that she could be content with Dylan even if they were different in age. Bella went on to describe how seeing me made her feel uneasy. She acknowledged that she coveted my independence and the fact that I didn't actually require a partner to look after me. She expressed regret for offending me. I explained to her how hard I had worked my entire life to get to where I am now at work and that I could understand her perspective. Her eyes were downcast as she nodded seriously. After that, I asked her to describe what had transpired at her wedding to Dylan. She admitted that she was taken aback to see Jake when I took him to the wedding. She had never felt the same way about Dylan until she saw his face and understood how much she still loved him. Jake told me that they discovered they still loved each other after they talked about their sentiments in private at the wedding. Bella left a note for her family, so they made the decision to flee together. They were deeply in love and had been together since that day. Bella told me that she discussed this with her parents. They were furious at first, but in the end they chose to stand by her. Additionally, she disclosed that she intended to apply for an annulment with Dylan shortly. Even though I wasn't totally comfortable hearing this, I was glad that at least two people were content following the terrible occurrences. I could tell Bella and Jake were beaming at one another. After eating lunch and continuing our conversation, we finally said our goodbyes. I haven't spoken to either of them much since that conversation, and don't want to be involved in their drama. I intend to continue working hard at my profession and concentrating on myself. I'm not sure what Dylan's future holds. Now to the next story 5. Am I the asshole for calling the police after my mom abandoned my siblings at my doorpost moving out? When I became 20, I left my parents' house because it was intolerable. My name is Ethan, and I am currently 22 years old. They acted as though everything I owned belonged to them as well, frequently gave preference to my younger siblings, and utilized me as unpaid labor. When I moved out, my father, Mark, told me to remain away and not let the door hit me on my way out. I had been working at the same full-time job for almost 4 years, and I rented the tiniest and most economical apartment I could locate. Not even a month had passed when my parents, Mark and Emily, began phoning me to beg me to come back because someone else needed to look after my brothers. I said no, enjoying my newfound independence. Eventually, my father insisted that family should come before personal independence and made me move back and pay them rent. I responded that for once, I was living for me and that my life mattered too. We didn't talk for months after he said, "Let's see how long you last without us." I'm not sure what he was expecting, but I got along just fine without him. My family and I gradually began to patch things up once they came to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to return on my knees. They clearly found it difficult to accept that I now controlled the situation rather than them. Even though the two closest to me were in their late teens, they nevertheless pleaded with me from time to watch my youngest siblings. Since they had always thrown the babysitting load on me, my parents' refusal to take on the responsibility seemed hypocritical. They gaslighted me when I brought this up, and then they once more were silent for months. In the end, it was them who returned to seek my assistance. I recently purchased a used gaming console, but I was only able to afford the single game that was included. My mother requested me to keep my two youngest siblings for a bit one Saturday. I was left alone with them in my tiny apartment all day after she essentially pushed them inside and walked off. I contacted my mom and insisted that she come grab the kids, which is why she didn't come back until after 10 o'clock. She didn't like that I interrupted her enjoyment. I warned her that I would no longer watch my siblings all day unless she paid me, and that if she left them outdoors the next time, I would call the police and wouldn't even open the door. I discovered my gaming console was gone the following morning. I thought one of my siblings had taken it, so I contacted my parents. My mom said it could wait as my youngest sibling was playing on it and she didn't have the heart to take it away, even though I stated I would come over right soon to retrieve it. I claimed that it had been stolen without my consent and that I would be picking it up. As fast as I could, I rode my bike to their house. My sibling was crying when I got there since they were missing the charger and the console's battery had died. When I asked for it back, my father took it and told I could have it back if I helped out more with my siblings. I wasn't bluffing when I informed him that I would call the cops if he wanted to play that game. He refused to back down until I began making phone calls. My mother shouted, "Hold on." I swiftly reclaimed the console from my father. She claimed it wasn't worth having the cops come on them, but he called her a traitor and insisted she give it back to him rather than to me. I assured them before I left that I would not think twice about calling the police if this occurred again. They could purchase their own gaming console if they truly wanted one for my siblings. My father, Mark, screamed that I couldn't treat him in such a disrespectful manner. I retorted that I'm an adult, but he's never bothered to treat me with any respect, and I'd had enough. He then yelled at me to turn around and face him as I left. At the moment, they are once again silent. I once received a text from my mom, Emily, pleading with me to continue watching my siblings. Since I wasn't doing it for free anymore, especially after they stole from me and attempted to prevent me from reclaiming my property, I told her that if she really wanted me to babysit, she could pay me, but I would only accept the money up front. I am not their property. They can either adjust or become disoriented since I am an adult with a place of my own and a life of my own. Since that text exchange more than a week ago, none of them have gotten in touch with me, which is okay. They are capable of handling their own mess. Update. It's unbelievable that I completely forgot about this account for almost a year, but I happened to stumble upon my original post when browsing Reddit videos online. I've returned to provide an update after realizing that I completely neglected to do so. Toward the end, there will be some light fighting and police intervention. I thought I'd bring it up even though I'm not sure if that counts as a trigger warning. I recently wrote about my parents' refusal to return my gaming console after one of my siblings stole it, as some of you may be aware. If my parents ever drop my younger siblings off at my door without asking again, a lot of commentators advise contacting the police or CPS. I waited and waited, but it had been around 3 months since my mother had last called, and I wouldn't watch my siblings for free. Then it came at last. When my parents unexpectedly called to ask me to watch the kids, they pretended if the previous console incident had never occurred. I informed them that it had to be a day when I was off from work and that I would not babysit unless they paid me. I no longer had Saturdays off due to a change in my schedule. Since they most frequently asked me to babysit on Saturdays, I really asked my boss for it. Additionally, it was more cost-effective for me to take on an additional shift. As usual, my dad became enraged and told me to man up and lend a hand. As he usually promised to do at my age, I pointed out that he should stop acting as though he controlled me and that, in a technical sense, I was manning up for myself and my own life. However, he dumped a lot of his duties on me and worked on Saturdays so he could forget about them. I was finished with their demands, as far as I was concerned. My mother grabbed the phone away from him after he began screaming into it. Since Sunday is my sole day off, I stated that I could only watch on Sundays and that I would only do so if I was paid $40 and my siblings' lunches, dinners, and snacks were prepared in advance. Since feeding them isn't my responsibility, I wasn't going to waste my money on it. I also made it plain that I would call the police to retrieve anything that was taken from me, such as my console the previous time it was stolen. To make it easy for the authorities to verify that it is mine, I kept the receipt from the time I purchased it and wrote down the serial numbers. My mother became enraged and began to curse like a sailor who had just lost a tooth. Before she discovered I wasn't answering and began insisting I say anything, I let her vent while essentially ignoring the phone. My demands were Sundays only, $40, and prepackaged food, or else they could forget about it, I said to her and my father. On the other end of the line, there was a moment of astonished quiet. My mother then blasted me once again, claiming that my younger siblings, who are 13 and 16 years old, had to take over for me because I was no longer there and they needed a vacation. "Oh, like how you guys gave me breaks?" I asked, laughing. As never before. My mother attempted to claim that because I was the eldest child, things were different. I explained to her that it wasn't different at all. I had lost out on a lot of my youth because they had parentified me. It is hypocritical of them to pretend as though I should take over again now that I am living on my own without them. The two teens living with them are capable of doing anything I used to do. My mother went into victim mode and said that my adolescent siblings were disobedient and unheard. Since I was too busy living my life, I informed her that their issues weren't mine and that they needed to find another daycare provider. My father returned to the phone and began to scream at me once more. He was simply blowing hot air and not actually saying anything, so I just laughed at him. My mother retrieved the phone and begged me again. I restated, $50, prepared food, Sundays only, and I would not think twice about calling the police if I received threats or had any of my belongings stolen. My parents began arguing loudly at one another about what to do, so I told them to figure it out and get back to me later. I hung up after that. For a time, radio silence returned. A few weeks later, I was getting ready for work on a Saturday morning when I heard a loud, quick knock at my door, the kind where you can tell they're using both hands. I've heard my mom knocking for years to let me know she was there, so I'm familiar with the sound. What sounded like someone rushing noisily along the hallway after the banging. Hearing my two youngest siblings arguing and tapping on the door themselves, I listened through the door. My mom had just run off, leaving them outside the door. I had a straightforward strategy for this because of all the warnings I received after my last post. I simply rolled down my window, got out, and left. I can easily climb out of the window by just ripping the screen out of my ground-level apartment. I contacted my neighbor, a kind elderly woman who enjoys having children, who lives a few doors down, and gave her the scoop. She has long been aware of my predicament with my narcissistic parents, and she phoned the police so I could inform them that two children were left in the hallway after their mother beat on a door and fled. Let's just say that my siblings were picked up by the cops. Later, I got a call from my parents, who were very upset. I asked them what they were so upset about, acting as though I had no idea. When I inquired if my mother had simply left my two youngest siblings at my door without anyone answering, she completely acknowledged that she had left them there for me to watch before running away. She explained that I was already out because I had to work on Saturdays. After a few moments of silence, my mother screamed, "How in the world was I meant to know that?" I retorted that she was solely to blame and that she had practically left her children at my door, hoping that I might have been home on a day that I had previously informed her I worked on multiple occasions. By forcing me to watch them, she was attempting to make me miss a shift. She began offering justifications, but I told her that what she had done was unacceptable and immature. I waited for her to stop weeping for a while before asking if she was finished. She reverted to her hostile demeanor and kept shouting. She shouted that she was being charged with child abandonment by the police. She left the children in the hallway, so I replied that wasn't really my fault. Then I said that if I had been at home and she had refused to come back for the kids, I would have called the police on her too because I had already informed them that I now worked on Saturdays and I didn't want to be forced to babysit anymore. She continued to argue pointlessly for the remainder of the call, which didn't really accomplish anything. In the end, my mom just received a fine and a slap on the wrist because she persuaded the police that she genuinely believed I was home. At least that's what my next sibling claimed when he contacted me. The fact that she had to pay a fine should make her reconsider leaving children at my door and fleeing again, but I'm not sure how much it was. Since my dad was at work and said he didn't know she was going to leave my brothers at my door, he wasn't charged. He was reportedly furious with my mother for doing it. I couldn't stop laughing at this pot and kettle scenario. However, I suppose I must give my old guy credit because he had never done what my mother did. In any case, my mom now has a police record, which is, in my opinion, a first strike in the eyes of the law. Thanksgiving was the turning point after that. I was completely anticipating my parents' invitation to be a trap of some sort. It was too. My dad pretended to be in control while he sat at the table smoking a cigarette during supper. He said, enough was enough, and that he was ending this farce after having my mom sit me down. He informed me that they had no more time for themselves and that the fine my mom had to pay had a significant negative financial impact, so I needed to return home, help with the bills and mortgage, and help raise my siblings. Regardless of how much he tried to command me, I just answered no, and I continued to do so. Even though he's a big man, he became so enraged that he actually attacked me. Fortunately, I'm not either, having acquired some amateur fighting techniques and been going to the gym for months. When he came at me, I kicked him quickly in the balls because I was wearing steel-toed boots too, and then I struck him hard enough in the face that he fell to the ground in an instant. He landed with a loud thud and clutched his groin, vomiting from the pain. I then informed my parents that I could easily prove he attacked me first because I had my phone filming in my pocket the entire time. I complied with my dad's order to leave his house and never return, but not before stealing a turkey leg from the plate and riding home to eat it. The only people who have phoned or contacted me since are my siblings. I marched out like a boss, they claimed, and now dad's poor balls are the subject of constant jokes in the house. I was invited to return for other holidays after spending Christmas with a friend's family. Update: my parents blame me for losing the baby because my mom was pregnant. I now see why my parents attempted to have me return home for Thanksgiving. I have just learned that my mom was expecting her sixth kid. First of all, shortly after my last post, one of my siblings discovered my Reddit account and showed it to our parents. In response, my parents stormed into my apartment and yelled at me, accusing me of being a horrible parent and of arranging for my mom to be detained. Yes, they are. Standing in my doorway, I yelled at them for all they had done, including putting my siblings at my door on a day when they knew I was at work. In any case, that is poor parenting. I would have called the police on mom when she left the kids at my door, so it didn't really matter that I set them up, it wouldn't have mattered in the end. I replied that behavior alone confirms my belief that they are bad parents, and my dad appeared to be about to raise a fist in my direction. Then he said that if he tried to hit me, it would end the same way it happened the last time, and I didn't think my boots, yes, I was wearing them, could hit his balls again. When he remembered what I had done to him the last time, Dad appeared to wince and tense his legs together. In the end, he dragged my mother out by the hand and left. Before he left the corridor, he shouted back that since I was entirely to blame, he expected me to reimburse them for the fine they had to pay for child abandonment. I informed them that I owed them nothing and told them to fuck off. They remained silent in response. I received some extremely horrible news not long ago. After a terrible incident at home, where she tripped on damp porch stairs and fell face down in gravel, my mom, who was about 7 months pregnant, lost the baby. To be honest, when I saw her before that, I had no idea she had been pregnant. She's always been awkward and a little heavier than average, not fat, but just enough that it's hard to tell if she's pregnant or not. She definitely wanted someone to blame because this was her first miscarriage, which is heartbreaking. I destroyed the family by not assisting them and by costing them a lot of money, therefore in her opinion, someone had to be me. She was on crutches when she and Dad returned to my place to accuse me of being the cause. I didn't come home to help when they needed me, thus she lost the baby. I called them out on their attempts to blame me for something that wasn't my fault and their need for free childcare, which led to a quite heated debate. In any case, I assured them, it's not my fault that they became pregnant again when Mom was 45. Dad was too frugal to ever replace or repair the decaying old porch, so blame it on it. When I said that, my father put his hands on me once more and gave me a stinging right hook. I ultimately kicked his ass again after that. I've continued to train out at the gym, and I've gotten stronger since defeating him during Thanksgiving last year. There was no chance for him. My mother's yelling forced me to stop when I lost my temper and broke his nose and knocked out both of his front teeth. My father needed to be transferred to the hospital, so the police called and I was placed in handcuffs. Fortunately, my apartment complex's halls are equipped with CCTV, and I also had my phone camera recording behind me in my unit. When my parents knocked, I began to record. The video clearly demonstrated that I defended myself after my father hit me first. Since it was deemed self-defense, I'm basically safe, but now my parents want to sue me for my dad's medical fees and the fine they had to pay earlier. I defeated Dad, so he won't be able to go to work for a while. He has 2 lost teeth, a black eye, a broken nose, a neck brace, and who knows what else. He is also really upset that he had to shave off his beard. I suppose this makes him even more dead to me because I already thought he was pretty well dead before this. He no longer has the little authority he once believed he had as my father. Because of all the hard work I've put in over the past few months, I'm physically stronger than him and will soon be starting a new job that pays significantly more. I might be able to get a much better place to live after a few years of saving. When my oldest sibling became 19, they called to tell me that I was their hero for beating the living daylights out of Dad and that they were going to leave, just like me. However, my parents found out about my Reddit posts once my next sibling discovered them after hearing about them on YouTube. My mother apparently forced them to show her my post after overhearing them discussing it. They stated she broke items because she was angry. My siblings have expressed regret for letting Mom and Dad know, and they claim that if they had realized Mom was listening, they would never have brought it up. Additionally, both have expressed their happiness that there won't be another child. They already have to handle a lot of my parents' babysitting, which they detest. They acknowledge that they first blamed me for leaving, but they now understand that you have the right to choose your own path as an adult. Whether my parents will actually attempt to sue me is still up in the air, but I believe I can state that if they do, it will be a loss for them. My friend's uncle is a lawyer, and he promised to defend me in the event that my parents filed a lawsuit. He adds that since it was self-defense, they don't have much of a case. To my folks, who will most likely see this, leave me alone, please. That's all I have to say. My siblings and I are not your property, and I will assist them in leaving your home when they are old enough to do so at the age of 19. Both of you have always been self-centered egotists. It's not my fault that Mom lost the baby, and it's not my fault that you struggled so much without me around to watch your kids for free. Think of that smashed nose and missing teeth as a good excuse to avoid me in the future. Remember that because of you two, I have only told you a small portion of the nonsense that occurred in my life. I could share story after story about the events in my early years if I so desired. However, I wouldn't be satisfied with it. So please, don't bother me. P.S. Yes, my mom had to give birth to a stillborn baby at the hospital, but I wasn't going to bring it up earlier. According to my siblings, my parents had a secret funeral among themselves, and Mom brought home a little urn that she keeps in the bedroom. After leaving with the urn for a few hours, they returned intoxicated. My mom spent over 6 days in the hospital due to whatever injuries she sustained in the fall. I've contacted my siblings for further information. Someone asked if she had been shoved. I'm now doubting that myself. The only excuse I could come up with was that Mom was in a hurry to be somewhere when she slipped and fell off the porch. I've heard of folks suffering more severe injuries in more foolish ways. When I researched the cremation procedure, I found that it would take 8 to 12 days to obtain the ashes. This indicates that the urn they brought home was empty. I'm completely perplexed. However, my parents' funeral took place a few days after Mom left the hospital. Until the day of their small funeral, my parents kept that urn in the bedroom. They may have collected the ashes by then, I suppose. Perhaps it explains why they returned home intoxicated, but this situation is so strange and twisted that I'm having a hard time thinking about it anymore. Revise posting again so soon feels strange. I mentioned in my last post that my mom had a recent miscarriage following a serious fall. I had a bad feeling about the information I was given. I concluded that going directly to the source was the only way to obtain the truth after reading all of the comments I had gotten about it. I visited my parents on Sunday. They both appeared to be in terrible shape and were at home, sleeping. In addition to using crutches to walk more than a few steps, my mom appeared to be very exhausted. I saw that she had numerous bruises and bandages on her face from the fall a few steps from the door. My father. To find out how he appeared, read my previous post's depiction of him following the thrashing I inflicted. When I arrived, my parents were blown away. I insisted on knowing if there was ever a baby or if this was all a pathetic attempt to coerce me into returning home. After what happened, my dad claimed I had a lot of guts to show there and let myself in. However, my mother sobbed as she revealed that she had actually been pregnant. She stumbled into the bedroom and picked up a little urn that seemed really elaborate. It was filled with ashes. They didn't smell like anything, even when I looked to see if they resembled cigarette or barbecue ashes. I didn't really smell anything at all. Even though I had looked online and saw that it takes at least 8 to 12 days to get the ashes returned, I questioned why they brought the urn home and said that the ashes were already inside. Mom had spent no more than 6 days in the hospital. According to my mom, they purchased the urn online with the hope of retrieving the baby's ashes upon visiting the crematorium. They simply waited till they could retrieve the ashes a few days later and then went out to get drunk because they were so distraught that they couldn't bring the kid home yet. Mom said she begged the crematorium to do things a little faster. Her eyes were filled with real tears. Although I've witnessed her crocodile tears numerous times, this one didn't appear to be that. I learned more about my mother's fall and what transpired. She was late for her appointment with her physician, an OB/GYN, or whatever they are called. Mom clarified that she was attempting to get out to her appointment after oversleeping during her nap. Then, as she attempted to down the stairs, she slipped on a toy. About 3 years ago, the porch's guardrails deteriorated and snapped off, and Dad never restored or repaired them. Mom had nothing to cling to then. She fell straight off the porch, hitting the ground with her face and belly first. She even showed me the marks from her landing all over her stomach. She informed me that the child would have been a male. There would have been one more brother in addition to my 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Then Mom told me that because of her age and past injuries, a doctor advised her not to try to conceive again since her body might not be able to take it. It wasn't any easier to hear in person, but I kind of assumed that was the case after some individuals messaged me about it. At last, I posed the crucial query: why did she hold me responsible? Mom began to add something along the lines of, the day they showed up at my apartment was just really, really bad. But Dad interrupted her. It's all my fault, he screamed. I would have been there to help if I had followed his advice and returned home for Thanksgiving, and now I'm responsible for the death of a baby. I screamed back at him, telling him that he was to blame since Mom might not have fallen if he had actually bothered to fix the fucking porch. Furthermore, not that it would have made a difference, he didn't even bother to inform me that Mom was expecting back at Thanksgiving. Instead of taking sides, my mother simply left the room in tears as we kept ranting at one another. My dad was so red that he looked like a lit match. He shouted for me to leave his house and waved his ancient hunting knife at me. He told me I was no longer his son as I was leaving. He was always a bad father, so I informed him that I hadn't seen him as a father in years. I told him before I left that I would be requesting a restraining order and that he would have to deal with the authorities the next time he attempted to harm my siblings in the same way that he had done me. He will lose more than a few teeth, and if he attempts the same nonsense with my siblings as he did with me, I won't think twice about calling the police or CPS. He swore at me from the front door, saying things like, "You son of a..." I retorted that that was a slight to Mom, and he became enraged once more. After that, I saluted him with one finger and rode off on my mountain bike. So, I suppose that's the best response I can give someone. I'm not sure what the truth is if this isn't it. Does it matter now though? As soon as possible, I'm going to file for a restraining order, and once I start earning money from my new work, I'll be seeking to transfer apartments. After this, I'm not sure whether I'll feel like updating again. Unless my parents do something horrible to my siblings, I think I might be done here since I'm just going to be depressed thinking about all of this. I hope I've made my message clear to them. Even though I've already given Dad 2 beatings, he still held that knife with a hint of fear. He thought he was staring at a monster. Perhaps he views me as a monster, but if that means he never harms my siblings, then that's okay. Sir, he will be the monster. Now to the next story 6. I was always overshadowed by my stepmother and stepfather's favoritism toward my stepsister, despite my hard work and achievements. Since I was 15, I have had to deal with my step-parents' blatant partiality toward my stepsister. My mom remarried Robert, 45 million, who owns his own accounting firm, and that's when it all began. Linda, 42F, his wife, is a real estate agent and is always immaculately dressed in fashionable outfits with flawlessly manicured nails. Ashley, 19F, their daughter, is the same age as myself. Almost immediately after we moved in together, the first indications of preferential treatment surfaced. Although there was plenty of room in our suburban Connecticut home for everyone, it soon became obvious that Ashley was the queen. My step-parents made sure Ashley stood out in every manner, even though other parents treat their kids the same way. Everything that came after was shaped by the day of the move. I was assigned the smaller room that faced the brick wall of the neighbor's house, and Ashley was given the larger bedroom with the bay window and window seat. Shopping excursions turned into a distressing reminder of my role within the family. Ashley would shop at high-end stores for designer clothing and new Nike sneakers, while I was told to check out Target's sale shelves. Robert gave me a $50 Old Navy gift card the first time this happened, and I recall standing in the mall watching Linda and Ashley vanish into Nordstrom. He said, "Get whatever you need," and turned to follow them. I will never forget the casual dismissal and the unambiguous message about my position in the family hierarchy. The way they treated us at family time was more painful than the tangible differences. Whenever Ashley talked about her day at supper, Linda and Robert would genuinely listen and lean in to offer follow-up questions. They would hardly look up from their plates when it was my turn to contribute, making merely infrequent mm-hms or bringing up other topics. I once attempted to spread the word about my victory in the school science fair. Linda cut me off before I could finish, reminding Ashley that her costume fitting for the dance recital was coming soon. It was especially annoying when it came to extracurricular activities. Ashley participated in every activity in which she even remotely expressed interest, including private tennis instruction, dance classes, piano lessons, art workshops, and drama club. I asked to join the school's debate team, which only cost $100 to register, but Linda replied, "We need to be mindful of the budget." The following day, they enrolled Ashley in private swimming lessons that cost $200 per hour because she said she liked the water. Our communal restroom turned into yet another battlefield. Ashley's side was filled with pricey Sephora skincare and makeup, while I utilized cheap brands that I purchased with my stipend, which was a fourth of Ashley's. The towels were also different. I used the simple ones from the hall closet, but she had soft monogrammed pairs. She was so upset when I inadvertently used one of her face washes by accident that Linda had to create a lockable cabinet for Ashley's particular items. As high school went on, the gap between our intellectual abilities grew more noticeable. Ashley found it difficult to maintain a B average, whereas I kept straight A's. However, their reaction to our accomplishments was oddly biased. Ashley's favorite Italian restaurant hosted a celebration dinner after she received a B+ on a history test. After I was elected into the National Honor Society, Linda asked Ashley about her cheerleading practice without even looking at the letter. I could never do it justice, but family photos do. Ashley is the focal point of every photo, typically sporting a fresh, stylish outfit. I appear like an afterthought in my own family photographs, always in the background, wearing whatever was on sale. Since Linda had just provided him with Ashley's dimensions and preferences for the shoot, the photographer really questioned whether I was a family friend assisting with our junior year photo session. Holiday festivities turned into just another reminder of my position within the family. Ashley would always have more gifts than I had at Christmas, including high-end gadgets, designer clothing, and whatever else was in style at the time. Typically, I gave useful presents like socks, generic school supplies, or small-value gift cards. Ashley received an iPhone and a MacBook Pro for Christmas last year. I received some clothing from a bargain retailer and a $50 Target gift card. Linda was already documenting Ashley's reaction to her new laptop when I attempted to thank them nevertheless. Their treatment of our social lives was also in contrast. For their get-togethers, Linda would order pizzas and provide fancy refreshments, and Ashley was encouraged to have friends over at any time. I once requested permission to bring 2 friends over so we could study for our finals. "Just keep it down," Linda added, "and make sure they bring their own snacks." "We're saving the good stuff for Ashley's cheerleading squad party tomorrow," she continued without taking her eyes off her phone. There is so much more to tell about how things developed from here, particularly with what transpired with my mom during all of this and how I ultimately received support from an unexpected source. I have been keeping notes on my phone about everything that has happened. If you would want to hear the rest of the story, please let me know. It becomes more challenging, particularly when some family secrets are revealed and college preparations start. In our junior year, things really began to change. I applied for a job at a neighborhood coffee shop after deciding I needed some independence. Ashley reacted right away when I told them over supper. As she gave Ashley another $100 cash for her weekend shopping, Linda nodded in agreement and said, "Oh my God, you're actually going to be a waitress? That's so common." The coffee shop turned into a haven for me. I had coworkers that genuinely recognized me and appreciated my contributions for the first time. After noticing my attention to detail, my manager, Sarah, swiftly promoted me from simple cleaning tasks to drink preparation. I became an expert at managing the morning rush in 3 months. Regular clients would especially wait in my line since they knew I would accurately recall their intricate requests. "You're a natural at this," Sarah would say as she demonstrated new latte art techniques for me. At home, however, Linda and Robert persisted in their apathy, save for when they could make fun of my work. "Careful with that plate, Ashley," Robert would say every night when they were eating. "Don't want you ending up as a waitress." They chuckled as I cleared the table in silence, presumably oblivious to the irony of my doing just what they were making fun of. Academically, I also had a sea change in my junior year. My lab reports were frequently cited as examples for the class by Mrs. Rodriguez in AP Chemistry. "Notice how Audrey structured her methodology," she would add while pointing to the projector showing my work. I felt Ashley's eyes searing into my back, but I continued to concentrate on the task at hand. This is university-level precision. It felt good to get my efforts acknowledged after years of being unnoticed. Parent-teacher conferences were one very eye-opening experience. My performance was being evaluated by Mrs. Rodriguez. "Your daughter has a remarkable grasp of complex concepts. She's top of the class, and her lab work shows exceptional promise for a future in scientific research." Before I had a chance to respond, Linda asked, "Are you sure you're not favoring her?" It seems like teachers always praise Audrey while ignoring Ashley's unique talents. With every academic achievement, the strain at home increased. My stepfamily seemed to respond equally and oppositely to every A+ I brought home. They would swiftly brush over my accomplishments and turn their attention to praising Ashley's most recent participation award or the C+ she worked really hard for. The night that altered everything then arrived. After finishing my calculus assignment, I was on my way to the kitchen for some water when I heard Linda and Robert conversing in their study. Normally, I would have disregarded their late-night chatter, but Robert's remarks made me take notice. He said, "Sometimes I wonder if we made a mistake," in a somber voice. Linda said, "What do you mean?" "Having both of them. Ashley would have been enough. She's everything we could want in a daughter. But Audrey, she's just there. We would have been fine with just Ashley." The glass nearly fell out of my grasp. My heart wasn't as fortunate, but I managed to catch it in time. In that instant, everything became crystal clear. All of the years spent hoping for a change and striving to win their love suddenly felt so pointless. I wasn't wanted by them. They didn't. I was the extra load they wished they didn't have to bear, the undesired addition. Something changed within me after that night. I gave up trying to win their approval and gave my studies my whole attention. My thinking unclogged in unexpected ways when I wasn't under the continual pressure to win their approval. My already excellent marks took on a remarkable quality. I started getting perfect scores, but they didn't notice or care. "Excellent analysis, Audrey," Mr. Peterson said one day in AP English as he held up my work about The Great Gatsby. Ashley tensed next to me, her pencil tapping angrily on her desk. "Class, this is exactly the kind of deep thinking I'm looking for. Your comparison of Gatsby's invented identity to modern social media personas is particularly insightful." From the corner of my eye, I could see her face getting red, but I continued to look straight. In other classes, similar scenes occurred. I was invited to a prominent essay competition in AP history because of my understanding of the Cold War. My experiment design in physics was chosen for the state science fair. Regardless of the subject, Ashley became more enraged the more the teachers complimented my efforts. When Mrs. Rodriguez invited me to coach other students in chemistry, that was the tipping point. She chuckled and remarked, "Your explanations are often clearer than mine. Would you consider leading some study sessions before the AP exam?" Ashley's voice came to me from downstairs that night. "Mom, the teachers are being mean to me. They always praise Audrey and make me look bad. They're doing it on purpose." With her high-end handbag swinging and her heels clicking on the linoleum flooring, Linda strode into school the following day. She marched into Principal Williams' office, where they summoned in Mrs. Rodriguez, and I observed from the corridor. "I want to know why your teachers are discriminating against my daughter," Linda pleaded. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out our progress logs and placed them side by side while remaining composed and professional. "Here are both girls' records. Audrey consistently scores in the top percentile in all subjects, while Ashley—" "Are you saying my Ashley isn't intelligent?" Linda cut in, raising her voice. "Not at all. I'm merely pointing out Audrey's academic achievements." However, she was not persuaded by any amount of proof. I heard Linda explaining to Robert that day when she got home that the teachers were clearly biased against their precious Ashley. I had grown weary of begging for pocket money and seeing Ashley receive hundreds of dollars for simply being alive. My job at the coffee shop was now my passport to independence, not just a haven. I opened a second bank account that neither Linda nor Robert knew about, and I began saving every dime I could. The tips from the regular customers went directly into that account, and they frequently increased them after they found out I was saving for college. However, even this minor triumph was not without opposition. Ashley and her friends would frequently leave their empty cups on the table, purposefully spilling liquids to make my job more difficult, and then loudly comment on how sad it was to see people stuck serving coffee. The message was clear. I wasn't even permitted to excel in a job that they viewed as beneath them. My coworkers noticed and began taking their directions instead. "I don't want anything to do with you anymore. You're embarrassing with your tiny house and budget clothes. I've moved up in the world," Linda yelled in a heated phone conversation I had overheard years earlier. She had been speaking to her parents, my grandparents, whom I had never met because they weren't good enough for her new way of life. I sneaked into Linda's home office that evening while she and Ashley were out shopping again, This time for Ashley's pre-graduation wardrobe makeover. I located the location in the older part of town under DF4, Do Not Contact, in her address book. I felt a mixture of fear and hope when I looked at that address. These were my grandparents. They might genuinely be interested in getting to know me and consider me more than just an unwelcome member of someone else's ideal family. After my shift at the cafe tomorrow, I've made the decision to go see them. I don't know what to anticipate, but I know I have to try. The address is just a few blocks from my workplace, in a neighborhood Linda would likely deem below her. I've been missing the family link for years, but maybe, just maybe, I'll find it now. After I meet them, I'll provide an update. I feel like this could be the start of something significant. I have a feeling that meeting my grandparents could completely alter my destiny, not just my current circumstances. First update. 2 weeks have passed since my last post, and I'm amazed at how much has changed. I was standing in front of a tiny blue house with a well-kept garden after my shift at the cafe that day. Every step I took up the path to my grandparents' house felt heavier than the one before, and my heart was racing. The well-kept grass was covered in lengthy shadows from the late afternoon sun. The door opened when I held up my hand to knock, revealing my grandparents, an elderly couple. The man sported wire-rimmed glasses and a kind smile, and the woman, dressed in a flour-dusted flowered apron, had her gray hair pulled back in a tidy bun. When I said, "Hello, I'm Audrey Matthews, I think you're my grandparents," they gave me a perplexed look. Their mouths fell open at the same time. My grandma said, "Oh my God, Frank," as she put her palm to her mouth, "it's really her. You look just like your mother did at your age." After they invited me in, I found myself seated in their comfortable living room, sipping tea from fine cups as they stared at me intently. Photographs from decades of family history that I was unaware of dotted the walls. Among them, I saw photos of my mother in her teenage years, sporting the same bashful grin I had seen so many times in my own image. Numerous visits followed that initial one. I would spend hours with my grandparents, bringing them cookies and pastries from work, while pretending to be working extra shifts at the cafe. They truly cared about every aspect of my life and were excellent listeners. They questioned me in depth about what I was studying after I told them about my AP classes. They offered to help evaluate my essays when I brought up my college applications. Things at school kept getting more intense. Princeton sent me a large envelope one morning. I could hardly open it since my hands were shaking so much. Full academic scholarship. Before leaving for home, I hurried to show my grandparents, and their response was just what I had ever hoped for in a family. As Grandpa continued to remark, "I knew you had it in you, kiddo," Grandma began to cry. When I eventually told Robert and Linda about Princeton, they responded just as I had anticipated. Distractedly, Linda remarked, "That's nice, dear," before turning to face Ashley. "Honey, have you decided which state school you're applying to?" My acceptance was entirely forgotten as Ashley sniffed and announced that she was taking a gap year to find herself through travel and self-discovery. Within minutes, they were talking about possible places for Ashley's gap year. After averting a potential catastrophe during a health inspection, I was promoted to shift supervisor at work. A little celebration was thrown for me by my coworkers, who signed a card and produced a homemade cake. It meant more to me than any praise I had ever received at home when my boss, Sarah, called me aside and said, "You're going places, kid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Everything changed once again yesterday. As usual, I went to my grandparents' house after closing the cafe. They looked at each other during our chat as if they were nervous. "Audrey," Grandpa started after clearing his throat. "We need to tell you something." I was astounded by what they disclosed next. As it happens, they are not the humiliatingly impoverished relatives Linda had always talked about. They had put their meager resources in a number of software startups after Mom severed their relationship. They decided to continue living simply in their comfortable home even if those investments had paid off handsomely. Grandpa stated, "Your mother left us because she felt we were too poor, too beneath her," using a headshake. "The irony is, we're probably wealthier than she is now. We just don't feel the need to show it off." Grandma said, "We've been waiting for the right moment to help you. And with graduation coming up, this seems perfect." Everything they told me is still being processed by me. I have more to say, but I must exercise caution in what I do next. 2 weeks remain until graduation, and Linda has been hinting about a large family celebration. For Ashley, of course. To celebrate Ashley's academic accomplishments, she has already reserved a classy restaurant and invited all of their friends. After I graduate, I'll provide another update. My grandparents claimed they had something planned, and judging by their smiles, I can tell it will be something important. I have a feeling that this day will be remembered by everyone in the family. Second update. The graduation ceremony proceeded according to plan. My step-parents hardly gave a cheer when they mentioned my name as valedictorian. However, they cheered and yelled like if Ashley had just won an Olympic medal when she crossed the stage. Then the shocking news arrived. Linda virtually bounced in her seat when she said, "Girls, we have exciting news. We're celebrating graduation in Hawaii." Over breakfast the following morning. Despite everything, my heart briefly felt better, but I should have known better. You understand, right? Someone has to watch the house, and you have your job at the cafe. "Honey," Linda said to me, her voice brimming with phony pity. "We only got 3 tickets for us and Ashley." Ashley stirred her orange juice without even trying to disguise her smirk. "Don't worry, sis," she murmured, sounding overly kind. "I'll send you lots of pictures of me living my best life on the beach." I observed them loading their pricey bags into the taxi the following morning from our front door. Ashley turned around and gave a theatrical, enthusiastic wave. "I'll make sure to send you beautiful photos from Hawaii." With trembling hands, I took out my phone and dialed my grandparents as soon as the cab vanished around the corner. When I heard Grandma's voice, the tears I had been suppressing finally came out. They went to Hawaii without me. They just left me here like I'm nothing," I cried. Grandma said, "Oh, sweetheart," in a gentle yet forceful voice. "Come over right now. We'll have our own graduation celebration." Still blotting away my tears, I pulled onto their street and drove to their house. At that moment, I spotted something out of the ordinary. A brand new Mercedes C-Class automobile shining in the summer sun parked in their driveway. Next to their small house, it appeared totally out of place. I strolled up to their front door and inquired, "Whose car is that?" Grandpa held up a set of keys, and his eyes glowed. "Yours. Happy graduation, Audrey." I was certain I had misheard him, so I stood there with my mouth open. They clarified that they had been waiting for the ideal opportunity to prepare this surprise for weeks. We celebrated with a lovely handmade graduation meal while we spent the afternoon together. A banner that read, "Congratulations, graduate," was displayed throughout the dining room, and the table was arranged with their finest china. 2 weeks passed slowly. My phone would ring every night with a new alert: Ashley posing on various beaches, dining at fancy restaurants, or relaxing by infinity pools. The captions for each picture got more and more offensive: "Living my best life as someone serves coffee." The day of their return then arrived. I was in the living room, looking out the window while feigning to read a book. I couldn't help but smile as I watched their expressions play out in slow motion as the cab arrived. Mom was the first to notice. Ashley dropped her expensive beach bag on the concrete driveway after she stopped so suddenly that she was directly struck by her. Dad almost stumbled over them both when he was fumbling with their pricey matching luggage set. Linda's harsh, high-pitched voice echoed through the front glass. "What is that?" Her immaculately manicured finger was quivering a little as she pointed at the Mercedes as though it would bite her. I enjoyed every moment of their bewilderment as I walked slowly to the front door. They all turned to stare at me as if I were a ghost when I stepped onto the porch. With his face flushed from shock and the Hawaiian sun, Dad shouted, "Whose car is that?" As Ashley often did while flaunting her fancy purse straps, I twisted the keys around my finger. "Mine," I replied. Ashley barkingly laughed, but I could detect the doubt in her voice. "Yeah, right. Like you could afford that on your waitress salary." With every word I could manage, I said, "Actually, it was a graduation gift from Grandma and Grandpa." Linda's cheeks lost color so quickly that I feared she may pass out. "What?" "You know," I replied with a smirk, "your parents. The ones you were too embarrassed to talk to because they were too poor. Those grandparents?" I feared Dad could have whiplash because he turned to Linda so quickly. "Linda, call your parents, right now." When Mom took out her phone, her hand trembled. When my grandmother responded, she didn't even make an effort to be polite. She insisted, "Where did you get the money for that car?" Grandma's quiet, mildly amused voice could be heard over the phone. "Oh, hello to you too, dear. Enjoying your expensive vacation?" There was mayhem for the following few minutes. Everything would never be the same after family secrets were revealed. Third update. I had never been happier as I was during the final weeks of summer at my grandparents' place. Grandpa's humming as he read the newspaper and the aroma of Grandma's coffee would greet me each morning. No feeling like an unwanted shadow, no fighting for attention, no walking on eggshells, just tranquility. It was bittersweet to move to Princeton. I bid my grandparents farewell with a hug and vowed to phone them every day before leaving in my Mercedes with everything I possessed. I felt as though I was crossing a line between my old and new lives on the drive to New Jersey. Just 10 minutes from university, my grandparents had gotten me a lovely small apartment. It was nothing special, but it was far nicer than any dorm room. There were large windows, hardwood floors, and even a tiny balcony where I could study. Despite my objections, they persisted on paying the rent. However, I still desired some autonomy, so I took a part-time work at a nearby coffee shop. I didn't miss the irony, still serving coffee, but this time out of choice rather than obligation. I found myself making true friends for the first time in my life, and the majority of my coworkers were fellow students. In the best way conceivable, the first week of classes was overwhelming. I was simply another freshman figuring things out, not the unwanted extra. Without any ulterior motives or comparisons to others, my students asked me to study groups, and my lecturers genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. About a month into the semester, Grandma called one Sunday afternoon with some intriguing news. She remarked, "Your parents arrived at our door yesterday." A beat skipped in my chest. What were they seeking? As usual, Grandma remarked. Linda was all smiles and phony excuses as she inquired about our financial status and made a reference to Ashley's impending birthday. Your father continued to scan the house, perhaps in an attempt to determine our wealth. How did you explain it to them? Holding my breath, I asked. The line was joined by Grandpa's voice. We informed them that we had already made a financial decision. Everything will go to you. When we brought up the trust fund we've established for your graduate education, you ought to have seen Linda's expression. I could see their faces. What was their reaction to that? Grandma laughed and said, "Let's just say Linda's smile didn't look so genuine after that." We requested that they not return. Additionally, Ashley had the audacity to send us a list of expensive cars that she would be open to receiving as a birthday present. Is it not unbelievable? I blocked all of their phone numbers and social media accounts that night, including Ashley's. I was prepared for the unexpected expressions of love and regret, as well as offers to start over as a family. However, I no longer required their type of family. Linda tried a fresh strategy the next week. She sent a long letter after somehow obtaining my new address, likely by looking through my grandparents' mail. It was filled with justifications that they would love to be a real family once more and that they never intended to hurt me. The P.S.'s request that I speak positively to my grandparents on Ashley's birthday was the most telling. After carrying the letter to my balcony, I ripped it into small fragments and allowed the wind to whisk them away. After that, I gave my grandparents a call and helped Grandma organize her garden for the upcoming spring for an hour. Real family feels like that. No comparisons, no stipulations, just love. I occasionally think about that young child who used to ask for her parents' affection as I sat in my constitutional law class, taking notes and truly enjoying the intricacy of the subject matter. Not only would she find love, but she would also find respect, support, and the ability to be herself. I wish I could tell her that. Here, Emma, my roommate, has grown to be my best friend. I was almost adopted by her large, devoted family in Massachusetts. They offered me to spend Thanksgiving break at their family's beach cottage last weekend. I almost started crying when Emma's mother gave me a hug and remarked, "There's always room for one more at our table." My study group most likely confirms our later meeting at the library when my phone softly buzzes in my pocket. Perhaps it's Jake, the adorable guy from my psychology class who persistently requests coffee, thankfully not in my cafe. I used to work as a barista, and my family situation is complex, but he doesn't care that we've been studying together lately. Now, everything is so normal, no drama, no incessant comparisons, no sense of inadequacy. It's just me, my education, my friends, and the bright future that lies ahead. I've begun researching law schools. For once, I feel like I can dream as large as I want, and Grandpa believes I'd be a fantastic lawyer. There probably won't be any further updates from me. I've closed this chapter of my life and am prepared to start a new one, this time according to my own wishes. I've discovered that it's acceptable when the family you pick is superior to the one you were born into. I appreciate everyone who has followed my journey. You have no idea how much your support has meant. If you find yourself in a similar circumstance, keep in mind that you should not allow someone to make you feel inadequate. You will be loved for who you are by the right people. Now to the next story 7. My stepsister lied that I was a prostitute and addict out of jealousy. My dad and stepmom believed her, ruined my reputation, and kicked me out. It never occurred to me, 22 degrees Fahrenheit, that a single family vacation would ruin my relationship with my entire family, yet here we are. I was a junior in college, working part-time at a coffee shop, keeping my life together, and maintaining a 3.8 GPA in business administration when this catastrophe began. During what should have been a restful spring break in Florida, everything changed. In order to strengthen our relationship, my dad, $45 million, and stepmom, $42 million, Thought it would be a great idea to share a room at the beach resort with my stepsister Lisa, 19 million. Although we weren't really adversaries, we had never been close. I was only there, but she was always their golden child. The neglected one who, for some reason, was never quite good enough. The initial days were awkwardly polite. By essentially acting as though the other person didn't exist, we were able to get along. It lasted until the third day, when I used her hairbrush without asking permission, causing things to blow up over something absurdly trivial. Lisa lost it instead of just warning me not to use it. She took my beauty bag and tossed it out the window on the 4th story. Almost everything I took for the trip, including my $200 foundation, broke on the concrete below. The true silent treatment started at that point. This was not your normal adolescent cold shoulder. Lisa refused to even acknowledge me when I was directly in front of her, acting as like I didn't exist. I didn't realize this was only the beginning. First, I thought, great, at least she's not destroying my stuff anymore. Things became strange back home. My stepmother and Lisa began having these lengthy, whispered chats that would inexplicably end as soon as I entered the room. Until I observed that my dad was also acting strangely, I didn't give it much thought. He would give me these expressions, which were more like disappointment than anger. Even dismayed. It made my skin crawl, although it was difficult to tell. My stepmother began to follow up with me all the time, asking strangely detailed questions about my whereabouts, the people I was meeting, and my payment methods. She would even phone my pals to confirm my location because the surveillance became that intense. My dad never knocked on my door before, but one night he entered my room and dropped a bombshell that turned everything upside down. He stood in my doorway like a judge and stated, "We need to talk about what you've been doing." Lisa filled us in on everything, the drugs, the prostitution, everything. It was so ridiculous that I actually laughed. Me? The girl who gets anxious if she is 5 minutes late to class and color codes her planner, a drug addict and prostitute. My dad wasn't laughing though. He thought she was real. In fact, he thought his workaholic, straight-A student daughter was secretly leading a parallel life. I attempted to clarify that Lisa was lying and that it was all untrue. I presented him with my bank statements, employment schedule, and attendance records for classes, all of which demonstrated that I was who I had always been. However, he became more irate the more proof I offered. Why would Lisa fabricate a story like this? He repeated himself. She is concerned for you? Everyone is concerned about you. After that, things quickly got out of hand. While I was in class, my stepmother began searching my room for proof. They questioned my pals, kept an eye on my bank account, and even made several calls to my place of employment to check on me. Without my knowledge, they downloaded a tracking program to my phone. I didn't know until my stepmother challenged me about taking a break from class to go to a coffee shop. When my dad insisted on seeing all of my emails and social media accounts, it was the tipping point. He threatened to cease paying my tuition and expel me if I didn't comply, saying they wanted to keep an eye on my conversations to make sure I wasn't seeing clients. It dawned on me then that they would never trust me over her. They saw me as already guilty. That night, I sobbed quietly in my room as I packed up the necessities, a few items of clothing, my laptop, some critical papers, and the emergency money I had been putting aside. I was previously allowed to crash on my buddy Sarah's couch. Lisa was watching me from the hallway as I was leaving. And what do you know? She had a sly smile. She was actually grinning, like if she had won a perverse game. It wasn't easy living at Sarah's. I was lying on a couch that felt like concrete in her already small apartment. To pay for necessities, I had to take on extra work at the coffee shop. My academic performance began to suffer. Maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working 30 hours a week and sleeping on a couch is difficult. I didn't reply to my dad's one and only text, "You can come home when you're ready to admit your problems and get help." On campus, the rumors began to circulate. All of a sudden, it seemed like everyone knew about my alleged secret existence after Lisa managed to get in touch with my former roommate from my freshman year. Someone accused me of embezzling money from the Business Students Association, which led to my removal as treasurer. I was invited to have a friendly chat with my academic advisor over my lifestyle choices. It seemed like I was witnessing my reputation slowly deteriorate. At that point, Kyle, 24 million, entered my life. He frequently ordered the same thing at the coffee shop, a big Americano with extra shots. He genuinely spoke to me, unlike everyone else who acted as if I were radioactive. Not just coffee orders, but genuine talks. He questioned why I always appeared so exhausted one day following my work. I had no idea why, but I told him everything. Hours after closing, we sat in the deserted cafe and I told him everything. Are you aware of what he did? I believed by him. Just like that. Complete acceptance of my truth, without any doubt or debate. For the first time since this entire ordeal started, someone had just trusted me without asking for evidence or an explanation. Kyle owns his own apartment and works in IT. He helped me locate my own studio apartment after learning about my predicament with Sarah's couch. It's small, just a little bit larger than my previous bedroom, but it belongs to me. Because my credit wasn't good enough on my own, he even co-signed the lease. Slowly, our relationship grew. On movie nights, we would watch old comedy on his laptop until we fell asleep. He would bring me coffee during study sessions and listen to me rehearse my speeches. Little things that restored my sense of normalcy. I had someone on my side for the first time in months. Kyle made the proposal 3 months ago. He brought out a ring, which was simple, exquisite, and just like him, as we were eating Chinese takeout on the floor of my small flat. I instantly responded yes. I felt as though my life was finally moving in the right direction. In addition to supporting me and understanding me, Kyle was also aware of the truth about everything that had transpired with my family. I witnessed his parents' sincere happiness and enthusiasm over the video chat that evening when we contacted them to break the news. The contrast between their response and what I would anticipate from my own family really got to me. The true drama resumed at that point. Lisa somehow learned of the engagement. My phone was overflowing with texts from my stepmother and father in a matter of days. All of a sudden, they want reconciliation. Despite their discussions of family feelings and moving forward together, none of them ever admitted that Lisa had lied. For believing her over me, hardly one expressed regret. All they wanted was for me to move on from the incident and resume my role as a happy family. Especially poignant was my father's message. Your wedding day should be about family. Don't allow pride to prevent you from inviting everyone. Does he believe this is about that? Not the fact that they effectively labeled me a drug addict and a prostitute. Not the fact that in my own house they treated me like a criminal. Not the fact that, without even giving me an opportunity to defend myself, they decided to believe Lisa's lies? Kyle proposed that we run away. Away from the drama, somewhere calm and quiet, just the two of us. To simply go away from all of this family turmoil and begin our life together without any burdens is what I want to accomplish. A part of me, however, longs for a real wedding so I can stand in front of everyone and prove to them that I made it through. That in spite of everything they did to bring me down, I managed to create a good life. Last week, I began organizing the wedding. We're planning a modest ceremony for the spring after my graduation, nothing grand. Kyle's family has been tremendously helpful, donating their backyard for the wedding and even helping with the arrangements. I always imagined that I would go dress shopping with my stepmother, and his mom accompanied me. When I found the one, a stunning A-line dress with intricate lace details, she refrained from crying. She remarked, "You look gorgeous, sweetheart." I briefly lost sight of the fact that she wasn't my biological mother. The problem with family is that sometimes the people who select you are more likely to love you than those who are meant to love you automatically. The guest list is the most difficult portion now. Kyle adds that whether or not I invite my family is completely up to me. Today is your day, he declares. You owe them nothing at all. He is correct. I am aware that he is correct. But why is it still so painful? Why do I still find myself pondering whether or not to call them while looking at my phone? I have a box of invites on my desk, some of which bear the names of my relatives. I feel nauseous every time I gaze upon them. Given how much they contributed to your suffering, how do you invite them to share in your joy? The hardest part is that I am fully aware of the consequences if I choose not to invite Lisa. My father will not attend. My stepmother will do the same. And since that's what they do, the rest of the family will most likely support them. She is always the one they pick. Always. Emma, 26F, Kyle's sister, has been my unofficial wedding planner and sane voice during this whole ordeal. She understands it differently than other people because she experienced something similar with her ex's family. She said to me, "Your wedding day is about celebrating love, not apologizing for existing." She is correct. The focus of this day should be Kyle and I, the life we are creating together, and the family we choose to be a part of instead of the one we are born into. A mother of the bride dress in a store window, a father-daughter dance song on the radio, or the blank spots in my wedding planning binder where family photos should be are just a few examples of the little things that remind me of what I've lost every time I think I've come to terms with the absence of my family. My extended family has also begun to take sides. Aunt Susan told me over the phone yesterday that family is forever, and that I must be the stronger one. In a lengthy correspondence, my uncle discussed forgiving others and moving on. My cousins have been using passive-aggressive social media posts about loyalty and blood being thicker than water. It seems as though they are all following the same script, which portrays me as the bad guy since I didn't want my abuser to attend my wedding. During those difficult months when I was juggling extra shifts and trying to maintain my grades, none of them were there. When I had to explain to lecturers why I couldn't take the holidays at home, none of them were present. When I sobbed myself to sleep, wondering what I had done to merit being treated like a criminal by my own family, none of them were present. Because Lisa is exactly that. Someone who made a concerted effort to ruin my life. She created a whole story to keep me apart from everyone I cared about, not just one falsehood. She smiled while she watched me lose our relationship with our parents, my home, and my reputation. The most annoying thing is that they still don't realize Lisa was lying, even now that my life is finally on track. I graduated with honors in spite of everything, I got a job offer from a reputable company in the city, and I married a wonderful man. My accomplishments ought to be sufficient evidence that I wasn't who she said I was. However, they can't acknowledge they were mistaken since they are so committed to her version of events. I have therefore made the decision to invite my dad and stepmother but not Lisa. With such knowledge, people are free to do as they like. I'll walk down the aisle by myself, head held high, knowing that I didn't sacrifice my dignity to maintain harmony if they choose not to attend. After all, self-respect is ultimately what this is after all. I deserve to have a wedding day free of turmoil and anxiety, but it takes more than pride or stubbornness to declare, I deserve better than this. Instead of those who have chosen to assume the worst about me without proof, I should be surrounded by people who love and support me. I'm sick of having to make all the repairs. I'm sick of taking the lead. I'm sick of acting as though my own family's systematic rejection of me didn't hurt. I'm sick of bearing the consequences of their decisions. So, for once, I'm choosing myself. Choosing genuine love over toxic familial relationships, truth over easy lies, and happiness over duty. I'm done attempting to insert myself into a story that wasn't intended to involve me in the first place, even if it means that I'm the antagonist in their tale. Am I choosing the proper path? To be honest, I have no idea. However, I'm making a decision that feels true to who I am and what I deserve for the first time since this whole nightmare started. Kyle says he's proud of me for refusing to back down, and guess what? I'm also proud of myself. The terrified young woman who packed her bags in the middle of the night has matured into a self-assured individual who recognizes her value, realizes that true love does not necessitate putting up with abuse, and has the courage to put her own pleasure ahead of other people's expectations. Perhaps the freedom to finally be that person is the true wedding present I'm giving myself. First update. I wish I could say that things had improved since my last post, which was 6 months ago, but life has a way of catching you off guard. Everything changed when Lisa's ex-boyfriend sent me a message last month. He messaged me on Facebook and said he wanted to share something significant with me regarding the gossip Lisa was spreading. I hesitated to answer at first. Kyle and I were content to concentrate on our wedding preparations, and I've worked hard to put all the drama behind us. However, what he revealed to me clarified and exacerbated the suffering. Lisa apparently had a total breakdown after a fight with her now ex-boyfriend a few weeks ago after getting wasted at a party. She came clean about everything, including the fact that she made up all the stories that I was a drug addict and prostitute. Why? She felt that I was receiving too much attention from men at her college, which made her envious? That's all. She was jealous of the fictitious attention I allegedly received from boys at her school, which is why she ruined my relationship with my family. I didn't even go to that school. Hours passed while I sat there looking at his messages, feeling like I might pass out. Screenshots of their text exchanges, in which she had revealed everything, were sent by her ex. He even volunteered to be honest with my parents if I asked him to. To be honest though, I no longer give a damn. The harm has been done. Kyle just held me while I sobbed when I showed him the messages. I was angry, not because I was depressed. 3 years of my life, 3 years of my own family treating me like a criminal. For 3 years, I doubted myself and had to start again because my stepsister was envious. I believed that having evidence would help me feel better. I believed that there would be some sort of closure if I knew the truth. Rather, it only served to highlight how little my family actually cared for me. They made the decision to accept these baseless charges in the absence of proof. Because Lisa said so, they cut me off, tossed me out, and treated me like I had no value. This is where the situation becomes even more intricate. Lisa discovered that her ex had gotten in touch with me somehow. All of a sudden, my family started bombarding my phone with calls and texts. My stepmother emailed paragraphs about family healing and forgiveness, and my dad left a lengthy voicemail saying that Lisa is really sorry and that she's been going through a lot. The worst part. In fact, none of them expressed regret. Instead, they are promoting the idea that Lisa was troubled, and that she needs her family now more than ever. There is not a single "I'm sorry for not believing you" or "we were wrong." In relation to Kyle, I discovered that I never fully explained how we got together. About 6 months after leaving home, it happened during one of my darkest moments. After staying up all night to finish a paper, I was working the morning shift at the coffee shop, barely getting 3 hours of sleep. Every morning, Kyle arrived for his customary large Americano with additional shots. He did, however, note how worn out I appeared that day. He inquired about my well-being rather than simply taking his coffee and walking away, as most patrons do. Right there at the desk, I started crying because of his sincere concern. Julie, my manager, noticed what was going on and instructed me to take an early break. For an hour, Kyle sat with me in the deserted cafe and listened to me tell him everything. He gave me his phone at the end of my break and instructed me to call him if I ever needed someone to talk to. It was weeks before I used it. I struggled with trust after everything that happened with my family. However, I eventually called one evening after receiving yet another guilt-tripping text from my dad. Until dawn, we conversed. The thing about Kyle is that he never pushed or passed judgment. All he did was listen and encourage me. When I was unable to continue living on Sarah's couch, he assisted me in finding my first apartment. When my parents cut me off, I had to drop out for a semester, which damaged my credit, so he even co-signed the lease. In order to return to school, he assisted me in applying for grants and student loans. We were just buddies for months. He would check my assignments, assist me in practicing presentations for my business classes, and even bring me coffee while I studied in the library. Friendship gradually evolved into something more. Of all things, we were reviewing my business ethics assignment when we shared our first kiss. Kyle gave me the impression that I had everything I needed, even though I was living in a small studio apartment and barely making ends meet between work and classes. He demonstrated for me what true support looks like and what it's like to be appreciated for who you are rather than what someone else wants you to be. The drama of the wedding followed. Last week, my dad gave me a call and said he would want to escort me down the aisle, but only if I included Lisa. She's really changed, and it would mean so much to her to be there, he said. It's all about Lisa's feelings once more. Requirements of Lisa. Lisa's joy. At last, I lost it. I expressed my feelings to him in detail, including his conditional love, his repeated preference for Lisa over me, and his willingness to let her ruin my life without ever challenging her claims. I advised him that perhaps he shouldn't attend my wedding at all if Lisa's attendance meant more to him than being there for his daughter. It wasn't warmly received by him. When I refused to back down, Dad threatened to not attend the wedding without Lisa, claiming that I was tearing the family apart, and that I needed to let go of the past. My stepmother supported him by stating that real family forgives and forgets, and that they are a package deal. Kyle's family has been tremendously helpful in the interim. Last weekend, his parents hosted a simple backyard cookout for our engagement, complete with close friends and family. His dad gave a moving speech that brought everyone to tears, and his mom created this lovely photo montage of our friendship. Yes, even Kyle. Seeing them so really celebrate our love opened my eyes to what true family support looks like. Plans for the wedding. After removing all the drama, the wedding preparations are progressing rather nicely. We discovered the ideal location for the reception, a tiny garden featuring an old-fashioned greenhouse. In an effort to give me something to pass on to our future children, Kyle's mother has been teaching me their family recipes. Through all of this, his sister Emma, who will be my maid of honor, has been incredible. She has shared her personal experiences with toxic family members and has helped me realize that it's acceptable to put my mental health above my responsibilities to my family. I had my last dress fitting last week. Along with my best friend Sarah, Kyle's mother and sister were present. I didn't miss Lisa or my stepmother when I put on the dress and looked in the mirror with other women who truly cared about me. Rather, I was appreciative of the family I had chosen and the one that had chosen me in return. Because he has demonstrated to me what unconditional parental love looks like, Kyle's father will accompany me down the aisle, not because he is taking my father's place. The list of guests is short but significant. All of the attendees have supported me at my darkest moments. Relocating to Seattle. After the wedding, we're relocating to Seattle for Kyle's new work. The relocation is being assisted by his firm, and we have already located an apartment. It's a new beginning in every sense of the word. A new town, a new city, and new employment prospects. Above all, it's far enough away that we won't have to worry about bumping into my relatives at the neighborhood coffee shop or grocery store. Sometimes the future we are planning seems like a dream. As we make plans for when we are both stable in our careers, we have started looking at homes in the Seattle suburbs. Kyle talks of one day starting a family and creating the kind of household we both hoped we had as children. It's simultaneously thrilling, frightening, and ideal. I blocked my entire family on all platforms yesterday, including social media, email, and phone numbers, something I should have done years ago. No more messages that make you feel guilty. No more playing with emotions. No more justifications like, but she's family. The truthful response to the question of whether I miss my family is yes. However, I miss the family I believed I had rather than the one that is real. Instead of the father who decided to assume I was a drug addict without any evidence, I miss the father who taught me how to ride a bike. Instead of going through my belongings in search of proof of crimes I never committed, I mourn the stepmother who used to assist me with my homework. Blood is thicker than water, I'm being harsh, and I'll regret this choice, several extended family members have been contacting me to say. But what do you know? The only thing I think I'll regret is squandering so many years attempting to win the affection of people who would never have chosen me in the first place. Last week the invites were sent out without my stepmother's, dad's, or Lisa's names. Even though there aren't many individuals on the guest list, they all genuinely care about me. Individuals that supported me when my own family refused to. People who unconditionally love me. My self-respect is compromised by those who encourage me without expecting anything in return. In my most recent post, someone asked if I ever considered what would have happened if I had simply forgave and moved on. The fact is, I do occasionally consider it. However, I then recall Lisa's sly smile as I was leaving the house that evening. I recall that without any proof, my father decided to assume the worst about me. I recall my stepmother treating me like a criminal, rummaging through my belongings, and phoning my place of employment. Now that I know that it was all due to Lisa's jealousy, that she deliberately attempted to ruin my life because she felt I was receiving too much attention, it only serves to affirm that I was correct to cut them off. Kyle asserts that I underestimate my own strength. He might be correct. I was the terrified girl who slept on a friend's couch 3 years ago, wondering if I would ever feel normal again. I'm now getting married to a wonderful man, starting a career, graduating with honors, and finally experiencing what true family love is like. To the one who inquired as to whether I worry about regrets, I do occasionally. However, I'm more concerned about the guilt I would experience if I allowed my family to continue to control and harm me. Walking away from individuals who only love us when it suits them is sometimes the bravest thing we can do. I'm now satisfied with the way things have worked out, and our wedding is in 6 weeks. It's not the wedding I envisioned as a child. No mother of the bride speech, no father-daughter dance, and no large family portraits with everyone dressed alike will take place. However, it will be genuine. There will be someone there who supported me, who had faith in me, who had chosen me. Fixing a family that never truly wanted to be healed is something I'm done with. I'm tired of having to be the one who must understand, forgive, and put everyone else's sentiments ahead of my own. I'm tired of being Lisa's backup daughter, the one who is only valuable when she doesn't require attention. Since I really don't have anything more to say, this is my final update. Lisa is no longer the subject of my story. It has nothing to do with my stepmother, father, or the family that didn't pick me. It has to do with the family Kyle and I are creating. About the love I discovered in the most unlikely locations. About the strength I was unaware I possessed. In 6 weeks, I will tie the knot with a man who truly loves me. For the first time in years, I'm not anxiously waiting for the other shoe to drop as we begin a new life in a new place. All I'm doing is living, loving, and at last, being free. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has supported me and followed my path. Your words of support gave me the courage to defend my position. Additionally, it's acceptable to leave if you're dealing with toxic family members. Making your own decision is acceptable. Finding happiness on your own terms is okay. There are instances when the family we build is more authentic than the one we are born into. And it's not just acceptable. It's stunning. Now to the next story 8. I legally bought 5 classic cars from a widow. Someone posing as her grandson tried to sue but was exposed as her granddaughter's ex. Original post. I'm close friends with a coworker, and we've helped his mother in her 80s with house maintenance. His mother's neighbor, I'll call her Elaine, was in her 90s in 2016, when Elaine's husband who was in the home died. While doing maintenance on my coworker's mother's house, I drove there in my 1975 Falcon, and Elaine came out to ask me to have a look at some cars I might like that had belonged to her husband. I won't go into detail except 3 were in good drivable condition and worth a decent figure, and 2 more were ruined but good parts cars. At the time I couldn't afford anywhere near what they were genuinely worth. 2 are at least in the top 5 desirable Australian classics, I told her what they could fetch on the open market, but she was happy to take $5,000 for all 5 cars, well under their value. She wanted to make sure they went to someone who would appreciate them, and I paid for and collected them a week later, and I still have the 3 good ones, 2 now on historic registration and the other in storage. Elaine passed away in the middle of this year, and her grandson is on the warpath over the cars. He's found my contact details and phoned me several times threatening to sue for effectively stealing the cars from his grandmother, and has turned up at my front door once demanding the return of the cars. I have not been served or received anything in writing from him in a legal sense, only his business card, which sounds dodgy. I've verified he's an actual lawyer as he claims through a website of his employer, which lists him with a photo as specializing in commercial and insurance law just like his business card. I'd have expected if there was a real legal issue with the ownership of the cars it would be in relation to the grandmother's estate proceedings, and I'd be contacted by mail by someone acting as executor, not via phone calls and doorstop visits by one angry smug bastard acting like it's happening between me and him alone. Since I'm not a lawyer and my presumptions could be completely out, I'm posting here. If need be, I could now afford the market price of all the cars. Is the grandson likely to have a case, and should I find a lawyer of my own? Relevant comments RCG Nal. But if Elaine's husband left them to her in his will, she was free to do with them as she pleased, ergo, the grandson has no claim. He'd be banking on your uncertainty of that to strong-arm you into cutting a deal. Don't ignore any official summons or claims, but you can safely tell him to sod off over the phone. If you want to get really petty, you could contact his law firm and complain about him, but as long as he wasn't intimating that his employer was in any way involved, it's none of their business, so they could tell you cool, so what? OOP. Thanks. Banking on my uncertainty is a good way to describe the vibe I'm getting from him. He's not exactly throwing his law firm's name around, but it is on the business card he gave me. On what the cars are, I feel more comfortable describing them now after reading the responses here. One registered is an XY-GT replica in nice shape built from a Fairmont. The other registered is an XB Fairmont coupe in excellent original condition, and the third I'm still working on getting back on the road is an XA sedan Falcon 506. The last 2 were wrecks and have already been parted out and the good bits kept. A spare XA sedan and an XW that looks like it had spent 30 years as yard art. The XW collapsed at the torque boxes and plenum while being trailered and nearly came off in 2 pieces, but worth it for the glass and trim alone. Update. I spoke with my coworker about the issue and he talked with his mother who clued me into her neighbor, Elaine from my previous post, not having any grandsons. My coworker's mother is still in contact with Elaine's son and daughter as they own and still work on Elaine's old house next door. She put them in contact with me. They wanted to know who it was who was actually threatening what about the cars as Elaine has no grandsons, and we spoke. They identified the lawyer grandson as an old ex. He was once a partner of but not married to one of Elaine's granddaughters for a few years. He's also known to be in a lot of debt, which might explain desperate hunting for valuable items. Elaine's son and daughter reiterated that their dad had left instructions to Elaine for the cars to go to someone who'd cherish them, and they were happy they did, and glad to hear from me that they're still being looked after together. I haven't contacted the faux grandson's law firm yet. I have a lot of evidence of his misrepresentations to me, and after Googling Nestabler law I'm not 100% sure of the legality of all of it, especially about sharing my home security and dashcam recordings directly to the other firm, or even speaking directly to them. I'll go through my own legal representation there as a filter on what I need to give them to make sure they know of his behavior linked to their firm. Small update, fake grandson came around twice more. I now have multiple records of him visiting my residence, threats via text and many phone calls to me after I asked him to not contact me again except in writing. Complaints have been made through my lawyer to his firm and relevant regulatory bodies. I informed him of the complaints on Thursday and reiterated not to contact me again, and I haven't heard a peep from him since. Last update. Fake grandson had already been dismissed from the firm before my lawyer and I complained, and he already has complaints against him for other reasons. Now to the next story 9. I cut ties with my best friend after discovering she slept with my boyfriend. She threatened suicide, and my family pressured me to forgive her. Original post. And I don't care. I haven't reached out. She slept with my boyfriend behind my back. We're both 20F and we've been friends since reception, 4 to 5 years old, UK thing. She was my sister, my rock, we stood by each other through everything. When my parents divorced, she was there to offer a shoulder for me to cry on. When her grandmother died, I was there keeping her afloat throughout high school. I'd been dating my boyfriend, 21 million, for about 3 years. We started dating in 6th form, a version of UK college, and he was my first serious relationship. I introduced him to my family, he was many of my firsts. He was sweet, a little awkward being a gamer guy, but he treated me to date nights and always made me feel special. Maybe this is me being young and dumb, but I thought I'd marry this guy someday. This was something I told my best friend. Well, about a month ago while my boyfriend was in the shower, I saw a text notification pop up on his phone. We look at each other's notifications all the time, so I grabbed his phone to see it. It was from her, asking if they were still on for tonight and if she should wear his favorite dress. He told me he was hanging out with friends and going drinking. Him going drinking with friends wasn't unusual, so I never thought anything of it, but in hindsight I wonder how much of him going out was with friends and how much of it was going out with her. I saved screenshots of their conversations. I sent them to myself. I showed him the messages when he came out of the bathroom and demanded he explain himself about them. I couldn't contain how upset and angry and hurt I was. An argument ensued where I told him he was disgusting and I left his place. Shortly after arriving home, I started getting bombarded with calls and texts from my best friend. I answered none of her calls. I couldn't stomach hearing her voice, but her texts ranged from, "She never meant to hurt me. My boyfriend hit on her first. It didn't mean anything." Then it got angry, saying I should hear her out. If I was a real friend, I would take her calls. I'm being petty and childish for not listening to her side. Then back to sadness, saying I was her closest friend in the world and she didn't want to lose me. My boyfriend was strangely quiet during this time. After a few days I got myself together enough to send them both messages. Maybe it was cowardly, but I didn't have the strength to call them. I told my now ex-boyfriend that we were done and I won't give cheaters any chances with me. He responded by trying to call me, but after the third or fourth attempt, he gave up. He sent me a final message saying it wasn't that big of a deal, that they'd just fooled around, but agreeing he didn't want to date me anymore. My ex-best friend was more persistent after I told her I wanted nothing to do with her. Day after day I'd get messages and calls from her. Demanding to talk. Demanding we resolve this. Demanding I not say anything to anyone. Saying she's stopped seeing him. Saying she'll kill herself if I don't talk to her. Really fucked up shit. I ended up confiding to a mutual friend about what was going on because I was seriously beginning to wonder if I was being a bitch. This friend reassured me that my feelings were justified. However, I wasn't expecting this friend to spread around what happened. The gossip spread like wildfire, and a few days ago my ex-best friend tried to take her life. I said nothing. I haven't visited her in the hospital. I haven't sent any messages to her family. Now her older sister keeps messaging me, telling me I'm a heartless bitch for leaving her at her lowest. For not trying to prevent this and that everyone makes mistakes, and that her sister didn't intentionally hurt me. Maybe it does make me a heartless bitch, but I don't care. I'm relieved she survived, but I'll never forgive her. I'll never forgive her betrayal. She destroyed our friendship when she slept with my boyfriend. Relevant comments. OP needs to move forward in a healthy way without being bitter about her ex and the best friend up. Thank you, I know, I don't think I'm over what they did to me. 3-year relationship and a 16-year friendship down the drain. I'll look into therapy, but between schoolwork and a part-time job it might be difficult. It's stupid because I wasn't feeling guilty that she had attempted to take her life, but after what her sister said I was starting to feel guilty. For not feeling guilty? If that makes sense? It was really getting to me, so I had to tell someone. I'm glad she survived, but I'm not looking forward to the next few days. I've already gotten messages from her cousin today. Commenter 1. Good, don't contact her or her family. That's done for. You're not responsible for her mental health. And make better friends, not gossiping ones like the one who told everyone. Just cut them off. And if your family tries to pressure you to be friends with her, warn them that you're not above going LC with them. Edit, block them all as well. Ope. Unfortunately, I don't think the friend I told had intended for it to get so bad. She really helped me understand that I wasn't being an awful person for not giving my ex-BFF a second chance. She cheered me up and made me feel better, but she told the rest of our friend group, and after that it was like Pandora's box. I've blocked my ex and my ex-BFF. I've blocked her sister as well, and it's looking like I'll need to block one of her cousins. This makes me a little sad. I was always so close with her cousins. My dad agrees with me 100% and told me I was doing the right thing. When I told my mom, I could tell she was disappointed and tried suggesting I talk to my ex-BFF, but I shut that down real quick and she backed off. Update 1. Hey again. It's been a while. First I want to thank everyone for all of their comments and support. In hindsight, I know now I wasn't being a bitch, but in the moment when I was being bombarded by texts and calls from her family, it's hard not to let those thoughts mess with your head. I didn't know if I was going to post an update, but some things have happened, so this might get a little long. Sorry. Giving fake names, ex-BFF is Nikki. Her older sister is Tammy. Ex-BF is Josh. I'll name anyone relevant as I go. So I mentioned in a comment that my mom wanted to speak to me later that day. I had a few replies warning me that she would try to pressure me into forgiving Nikki, and they were right. She came over to my dad's that evening and wanted a conversation in private. She asked if I'd spoken to Nikki yet. I said no. She asked if I was going to. I said no. I was trying to be as firm as possible because I knew what she was about to do. She asked, "Don't you think you should?" My response was, "No. I don't see why I should." I sent her a final message almost a month ago. This is where things began to really go south in the conversation. "Mom. Love, she's in the hospital right now. She needs all the support she can get. You're meant to be her friend." I didn't even know about her condition until her mother called me. Me? Really? I'm meant to be her friend after she slept with Josh behind my back. I didn't say anything about her because I didn't want to talk about her. Mom. Are you really going to hold a silly grudge? I understand she hurt you, but she's hurting so much more right now, love. Me. She's hurting? Mom. Yes, you both are. I raised you to be a kind, forgiving person. Why can't you forgive her? Me. What? Like how Dad should have forgiven you? This wasn't my finest moment. I didn't bring it up before because it wasn't relevant, but the reason why my parents divorced was due to infidelity on Mom's end. And it wasn't only a one-time thing, not that it matters even if it had been, but my mom always believed Dad should have just forgiven her. I admit this was a low blow for me, and the conversation spiraled into an argument from there, with both of us saying some not so kind things to each other. Eventually I decided the conversation was over because we were just going around in circles and heading into yelling territory, so I told her to leave and I'll try talking to her again when we've both calmed down. When she was leaving, she said this. "I hope you're not as cruel as your father." I'm typically not an angry person, but this infuriated and hurt me. I lived 50-50 between my parents. They both made sure I had everything I could need or want, but she felt her situation and struggles were undeserved. Dad never helped with bills or payments that didn't involve me. She expected more. Cheaters always do. I didn't say anything when she left, I just blocked her number and social media accounts and cried. She cared more about the girl who had hurt her daughter than said daughter. She realized pretty quickly what had happened and came back the next day, but Dad told her I didn't want to talk to her. True, and she had to leave. It took maybe half an hour before she finally left. The next few days she kept trying to reach me through other people, but I stayed silent. The Friday after my post, I decided I felt calm enough to talk to her and unblocked her. We spoke over the phone, which wasn't as exciting as above. Basically it was her apologizing and telling me she was wrong for trying to force me to forgive Nikki, that she'll respect my decision, but tried to suggest I think about it. I very firmly told her I was not forgiving Nikki. She just said okay. Things didn't really feel the same with us. I couldn't bring myself to be as chatty with her as I was before, and it didn't help that she kept giving me updates about Nikki. The first time she did it, she told me Nikki had been put on a 72-hour psych hold, assessed and eventually released. I told her I didn't want any updates on Nikki's situation. I won't stop her from checking in, but I didn't want to be involved. She complained and said she thought I'd want to visit her, but I threatened to block her again if she kept pushing, and she shut up. Nothing was mentioned about Nikki for a couple of weeks before Mom again broke my boundary and brought her up, telling me about how Josh had stopped talking to her and how Nikki needed a shoulder to cry on. I again told her I didn't want to know, and this was her last chance not to bring her up or I would cut her from my life. She complained again but eventually promised it wouldn't happen again. Maybe I should have learned from my mistakes because I know my mother. She doesn't take no for an answer. It was really quiet for a while. My friends and I had all basically carried on from what happened, and even though I know a couple of them still occasionally talk to Nikki, they never bring her up around me or tell her, I hope, how I'm doing. I thought I could finally close this chapter on my life, but nope. Today my mother called me and asked if I wanted to get lunch. I hadn't seen her in a while, so what was the harm? I head to the Weatherspoons we planned to eat at, and who do I find sitting with my mom? Nikki and her sister Tammy. As soon as Nikki sees me, she gets up and tries to hug me, but I just raise a hand and take a step back, and this girl has the audacity to look upset. Mom immediately knows she's fucked up because she's scrambling with all of the excuses. It hurts to see you two fall apart like this. You were so close. I thought you'd forgive her by now. And my favorite, she made a mistake. She misses you. During this time, Nikki has been quiet and I can see Tammy's glaring at me. I'm just so fucking angry and upset. I honestly didn't think she'd pull something like this. I wanted to leave and cry, but I looked at Nikki and said, for someone who's made a mistake, she sure hasn't apologized for it. Yet? She had this guilty look on her face and muttered something about me having her blocked and having no way to. I said, "Is that really all you have to say?" And she just looked at me confused. I was done. I turned to leave and her sister started yelling after me, saying that I owed Nikki a second chance with all the trauma I put her through. While Nikki was begging me to just listen to her and talk to her. I told them all to fuck off and never contact me again and left. I managed to get out of there before Tammy started a fight and went home, where I sent my mum a text a while ago telling her she'd better lose my number because she no longer has a spot in my life. Then I blocked her and just cried. My dad's been doing his best to comfort me, but it just hurts so bad that my own mother did this to me. So that's where things are at right now. I'll update if anything else happens, but this whole situation really fucking sucks. Relevant comments. Commenter 1, good on you for knowing your own morals and thoughts and not letting anyone else tell you how to think. I hope your dad supports you in this. Oop. My dad has been my rock through this. He's always had my back. We've spent the last few hours having some drinks and chatting just to help take my mind off things. My dad's to thank for that. He taught me to stand up for myself and told me, being kind doesn't mean being a wet towel. Makes me sad why he had to learn that lesson. Why was OP still in touch with her mother when she cheated on OP's dad? OP, because she was still my mum. I was a teenager when my parents divorced, and it was my father who encouraged me to maintain a relationship with her. New update. Hey there, everyone, I'm the girl who made the "my ex-best friend attempted to take her life" posts. I didn't think labeling this post like that really fit. I first want to apologize for taking so long to give you an update and to also thank you for your kind words. I've not been able to reply to many messages, and I've had a lot, but I've taken the time to read through every single one and I appreciate every single one of you. This Christmas has been amazing. I spent it with my family, with my dad. I went out Boxing Day night with my friends to party hard and regret it harder the following day. I'm in a much better place than I was back in December 2023. That's kind of why I struggled to give you all an update, because around Christmas plus New Year's 2023 I was not in a good place. I really needed to focus on myself and work on getting myself in a better place. As of January 2024, I have been no contact with my mother. Unfortunately, I've seen her since then, and I've done my best to avoid talking to her on the 3 occasions I've had to be in the same place as her. Not out of choice, mind you, but it is what it is. During Christmas 2023, she had expected that I was spending it with her and her side of the family. Given the events at that time, this was obviously not happening, and my dad told her as much. She lost her mind. She refused to take no as an answer leading up to Christmas. To the point Dad and I left for my paternal aunt's house on Christmas Eve to spend the night there. According to a neighbor, my birthgiver showed up pretty early in the morning to catch us leaving, but was irate to learn we already weren't there. Thankfully, my aunt had moved house quite recently, so my mother didn't know the new address. But we came home to parcels completely destroyed on our porch the following Boxing Day. There was even a Christmas card labeled to me, but inside was a horrible letter from my mother, describing me as the worst daughter on the planet. That honestly destroyed me and I spent New Year's a mess. It's difficult cutting off your own mother. I spent half of January 2024 trying to fix things with her, but it came to a head when I realized I was the only one forced to compromise. I finally cut off contact, and it's been that way since. There's been more between then and now, but I think those are incidents I'll post on my Reddit page or in the comments of this post to prevent it from getting too long. In terms of Nikki, I've heard she's doing better. We've not spoken since my mother's lunch escapade, but she's found a job and, according to a mutual friend, found a new circle. Despite everything that she's put me through, I'm happy for her. It's almost 2 a.m. here in the UK, so if I suddenly stop responding to comments, I fall asleep. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.